As the truth unravels, James Richardson's world spirals further into chaos. With Kathy's betrayal now exposed, James embarks on a perilous mission to confront the man who stole his wife's heart. Kenneth Turner, a billionaire with dark secrets of his own, becomes the target of James's calculated revenge. But as the lines blur between justice and vengeance, James finds himself entangled in a deadly game of espionage, where every move could mean life or death. In this gripping continuation, alliances shift, and James must navigate a treacherous path, questioning whether the pursuit of revenge is worth the price of his soul. I was in a meeting with some old friends and one new friend in a hotel room in Paris. It was yet another fancy hotel, and once again Kenneth and his group, along with my wife, were in a big suite several floors above my smaller room. My new friend was Jean-Marc Rousseau, and I believed he worked for DXC, the French agency similar to our CIA. All I knew was that Alain trusted him and had arranged this meeting. Jennifer was also with me, so much for her easy role without any undercover duties. But in reality, she was not supposed to go undercover for this task. That was the plan, at least. We had a plan. Instead of just thinking about how to take Kenneth out by shooting his plane, or in my case, trying to strangle him, I started to lose my cool. I got really worked up when I heard about an F-22 mission happening over the Atlantic Ocean. We were all brainstorming with Cowboy Rob when he casually mentioned that it was going on right now. So maybe all our talks were not even necessary. I wasn't sure if the storm clouds I felt over my head influenced that last decision, but maybe they did. Perhaps the shaky plan we were discussing had a bigger impact. Anyway, Rob grabbed the phone and had a quick chat with someone. That was it. For the first time in my career, I had a goal that mattered even more than just finishing the task. My new goal was to get Kathy out of this situation safely. I wanted her to be safe and unharmed, especially to keep her alive. Well, she made it to Paris safely, and so did I. Our third teammate was our old friend Adele from our Iranian project. He brought some useful tech gadgets with him. Jennifer hugged Adele in a way that made me a bit jealous, but then I hugged Adele back just as warmly. He was a great ally to have. By the way, he mentioned our friend Colonel Jaffer. Amanda and he were working hard to find Faris's children, now trying to get them out of Iran safely. Yasmin had been answering Darius's calls, and the colonel was using Russian-made equipment to track Yasmin's exact location. This equipment mimicked a cell phone tower to connect with the target phone's calls. A special antenna helped find the physical location of the phone. If the device's internal hacking methods failed, it could check the phone's GPS to read its exact spot. Yasmin was somewhere in southern Tehran, and Jaffer was getting closer to finding her. The next call should help pinpoint her location. Darius could only call her every 2 days without making Yasmin suspicious. Once they located her, Jaffer would personally escort her and her partner out. Darius was going to Mecca for the next Hajj, and then he would be given to Saudi religious leaders who were working with agents from the Saudi intelligence agency, the Mukhabarat. These agents would personally take him to Los Angeles and bring him to his mother. "So, you gave Jaffer the antidote?" I asked. "Of course," Adele replied with a sly smile, "but each antidote has a new poison, so he will need another shot in about a month. Or else..." He made a gesture as if cutting someone's throat. I couldn't help but think about that. "Okay, what's the plan for Kenneth?" I asked. "It's simple," Jean-Marc said. "He orders a lot of room service. I'll just pretend to be the waiter." "I would like to be the one," I said. "How's your French? Or at least your French accent?" "I can speak a little," he replied. "Say something in French," I challenged. "Comme ci, comme ca," he said. "Do you understand it?" His French sounded so fancy compared to mine, but I wanted to hear him try. I had a knack for imitating accents. "That's not bad," I said. "Your accent is just a tiny bit off, but those guys won't notice. Just be careful if you ever need to fool real French people. Try adding a bit of an Irish twist." "You mean like I'm from Brittany?" "Exactly. There are many bilingual people from that area in France. You'll just seem like someone from that region but still sound French," I said. I tried it, and he seemed pleased, just like I was. It was nice to learn some new skills. "So, how are you going to pull this off, Mr. James Bond?" I asked. "Yes, that's my fancy name for this mission," he replied, showing off the fake documents. "James Bond got me a cool gun with a silencer for myself and Jennifer." "Mr. Bond's favorite gun, right?" I joked, and he smiled wide. He had that charming French style, and I could see Jennifer noticing him too. Maybe Jean-Marc would help with her own healing. The plan went pretty well. I rolled the dinner cart into the room. 2 strong-looking bodyguards were already there, keeping watch. I started setting up the food on the table, but Kenneth waved me away. "I have someone else for that." He called out loudly, "Kathy, come out here!" Kathy stepped out of the bedroom, and I could see her face turn bright red. I tried to keep focused on my role. She looked down, feeling embarrassed, and Kenneth laughed happily at her reaction. I said, "Excuse me, miss," in my new Celtic French accent, and started to back away while looking down. "Another weak man," Kenneth sneered as I reached the door. I turned to open the door, but instead I quietly pulled out my hidden gun from my jacket and aimed it right at Kenneth. The guards weren't paying attention to me. They were focused on Kathy. "No sudden moves," I said clearly. I could see both guards from the corner of my eye, but since they were on opposite sides of the room, I needed to keep them in check by threatening their boss. It's interesting how our eyes see movement better from the side, so I could react quickly. One guard wasn't as bright as the other. When I pointed the gun, he started to move, and I fired. Blood sprayed from his thigh. I quickly turned my aim to Kenneth. "You smart guard, move carefully over to your friend Hans." He complied, and I spoke into my collar. "Okay, come on in." I didn't need the collar talk. It was just for show. Almost right away, there was a soft knock on the door. I opened it for Jennifer, who came in looking like a sharp businesswoman holding her own gun. "Hello, Kathy," she said with a smile. "Move over this way, away from Kenneth." Kathy followed my instructions. "Watch the guards while we secure them," I said as Jennifer stepped further into the room, focusing on the guards. It seemed risky to turn her back to Kenneth, but I knew she had a good view of him. Then Kenneth tried to act tough and lunged at Jen. She easily stepped aside and hit him in the face with her gun. I thought I heard something crack. Kenneth fell down, stunned. That's when Jen kicked him in the ribs. It sounded serious. "Come on, Jen, you weren't supposed to hurt him yet," I said. "Oh dear, we'll just get a video from the other side," she replied with a grin. We quickly tied up the guards after that. They didn't cause any more trouble once they were cuffed and their ankles were secured. I looked at the one I shot and said, "You're lucky I didn't hit a major artery. If I had, it would have been very bad for you, even with help. As it is, it's almost stopped bleeding. You and your partner better think of a story for the ER." Next, we needed to get Kenneth into the bedroom where Kathy could introduce him. Even though Kenneth was injured, he was still conscious and not very smart. I helped him up with my shoulder under his arm, but he mistakenly thought he was stronger than me. He tried to get me into a headlock thinking he could take my gun. Jin tried to keep his face turned away. Jennifer began to remove her clothes underneath her sharp business suit. She had some pretty stunning undergarments. Kathy was handling her own situation with style. "Okay, Kenneth. Jennifer has a little script memorized, and there will be a conversation happening between you two. We'll edit it to make it look like you were filmed without knowing. You just need to say yes sometimes or nod your head, but try to look a bit excited too. Jennifer is such a beautiful woman, isn't she? And trust me, you don't want to make her upset." So the story goes like this. "Oh, honey, things are going so well for us, aren't they?" Kenneth will nod and say yes. "With the extra money from Iran and taking Farah's funds, we can live like royalty on Anguilla for the rest of our lives together. That little trick we pulled on Colonel Jaffer was truly something. I easily took him down, just like you said I would. And now these fake Tron switches and this new fake neutron star part will buy us lots of time to just vanish. Anguilla is the perfect Caribbean spot for us. It's not crowded with tourists and caters to rich people. The security is good, and we'll have privacy." Meanwhile, Jen is kissing his bruised cheek to keep him from facing the camera and showing the swelling. We did several takes and came up with different dialogues. This has 2 benefits. With our editing, anyone like Colonel Manda who sees any version will think Kenneth betrayed the cause in Iran and especially to the Colonel. Plus, if Kenneth tries to tell the truth, he won't know which version might appear. Jaffer also wouldn't know if Kenneth was being honest. Also, since Jaffer is already under Adele's control, he will do whatever she wants. Kenneth doesn't realize he is already in big trouble. To add to this, Adele had more surprises planned. After we finished filming, we questioned Kenneth and got every detail from him about where he got the switches in California and who he talked to. We learned that SNL sold him the 3 units. He also told us who he was negotiating with in France for the special tools needed to create a beryllium buffer and layer for a high-efficiency fission bomb. Kathy had finished getting ready after the filming session. She was present during the questioning to look for any mistakes or to confirm what Kenneth had said. It turned out she knew a lot. Kenneth had become careless with his work and how he managed things. After about 2 hours of questioning, we put handcuffs on Kenneth and left him alone for a short time while we took a break for snacks. By this time, Kenneth was complaining about a bad headache. Jen and I had a little disagreement. We needed to go back in and check if he would give us the same answers to our questions, just asked in a different way. I thought we should let him deal with his pain. Jennifer disagreed, saying his headache might confuse him. I suggested giving him 3 aspirin and a strong drink. That would help ease his pain quickly but also dull his thinking, making him more likely to tell the truth. So that's what we decided to do, and we got almost all the same information. Kenneth was uncuffed after the second round of questioning, but he was still in a vulnerable state. Okay, we were close to finishing here. Jennifer aimed to get back at Kenneth for how he had treated her. Now it was my turn. I felt I had the right to stand up against the man who hurt my wife and others like her. Kenneth looked uneasy again. What? What are you going to do? He asked, sounding scared. I'm cooperating now. I replied, I'm going to take away your pride. I looked at Kathy and said, Would you like to take a turn? Kathy nodded with a fierce smile, ready to make Kenneth pay. Kenneth looked like he might be sick. I guessed he would be soon. Kathy returned, wearing one sharp, high-heeled shoe. I grabbed Kenneth's right hand with both of mine and twisted it into a strong hold that made him face down on the bed. His feet were still on the floor, and he was whining in pain, trying to protect himself. It was not easy for me to kick him from this angle, but Kathy thought quickly. She took off her shoe, stepped back a bit, and charged at Kenneth, hitting him in a vulnerable spot with her knee. I winced at the sound. The force of her move shifted Kenneth's body, and I felt some pressure on his shoulder, but I paid no mind. He had just thrown up on the bed and passed out from the pain. Our task was complete. I made it clear. As we left, I released the only guard who wasn't hurt. Then I told him to wait 10 minutes and follow his boss's orders. He needed to make sure no calls were made and no one left the room until then. I advised him to trust me. It was for his own safety. Adele and Jean-Marc were already heading to the small airport where Kenneth's plane was kept. The items Kenneth was hiding were still on the plane in a secret storage area. Jean-Marc was also on the phone, working with his team about a serious problem with beryllium. We decided we would need 3 more days to prepare everything. Kenneth would likely need that time to recover anyway. I instructed him not to take any action until he heard from me again. I gave him one of the special phones we used for important communications. I told him to keep it on and nearby until I said otherwise. The next day when I reached out, I informed him that Edgar, his money manager, had disappeared with a crucial laptop. But I reassured Kenneth not to worry too much. We would find Edgar. In fact, we already had him located, and some experienced financial experts were looking into Kenneth's bank accounts, especially the hidden ones in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. If he wanted to see any of his nearly $500 million, we had found most of it, and he needed to stick to Plan A. He had to give us valuable information about Iran's nuclear program, including where they produce materials and the number of centrifuges they have. Oh, and there was something personal to mention from Mrs. Turner Farah. She was officially divorced from him now, and all her assets were completely out of his reach. She and her lawyers were working to claim $300 million from Kenneth as her fair share of their assets, and they were actively securing Kenneth's business funds across the country. Kenneth had made a big mistake by mixing his personal and business money with Faris. The judge in the family court was easily convinced by the lawyers they couldn't hide their joy because they would get 20% of everything they collected for Mrs. Turner. A determined lawyer is like a shark that smells a chance to win. Kathy had already returned home to Washington, D.C. Elaine picked her up at the airport and took her to one of our safe houses in the suburbs, which had armed security around the clock. We were taking precautions to ensure Kenneth wouldn't try anything dangerous with whatever money he might still have access to. That kind of money could still buy strong criminals anywhere in the world, and Kenneth definitely knew I was in deep trouble. He could also tell others. Sadly, Kathy and I would need to create new identities after this mess. No matter what happened next, our old lives were over. Adele had brought several cases of special switches to Paris. They had gotten about 800 of these switches from Milko back in the late 70s and early 80s. After the FBI and Customs found out about these illegal shipments, the U.S. government asked for them back. About 500 switches were returned, but 300 were destroyed during testing. Or maybe they were taken apart to make new ones from scratch, using only resources from Israel. Adele's switches were still good, but they wouldn't last long. After about 60 days, the important parts would start to break down quickly. If they had to carry high voltage and current, they would become very unstable. This could ruin the careful design needed for a small nuclear weapon, like those meant for missiles. Adele had enough switches to replace all those on Kenneth's plane. This was important because if Iran tried to take apart these working switches, they would only end up with faulty ones. The new switches couldn't simply be swapped with slightly broken ones. Only fake ones would be made. These fakes would look similar to the real switches. Some pictures had been shared online, but they wouldn't work. Initial tests would show that poor Kenneth would have trouble even before we sent a video to some dangerous websites exposing his betrayal. Jean-Marc found some beryllium that was not pure enough for a bomb, but close enough. Iran would spend a lot of time trying to make it work. In reality, Iran could create a basic bomb using enough high-quality explosive, but it would be heavy, weighing around 5,000 pounds, and only have the power of 20,000 tons of TNT. Modern bombs, using the latest techniques, could weigh less than 100 pounds and need less than 2 pounds of high-quality explosive or plutonium, yet still release energy equivalent to 20 kilotons of TNT or more. Reducing the power of weapons to 1 kiloton for military use was a very complex challenge. It probably wasn't a top concern for Iran at the moment. Our best chance now is to stop them from quickly getting the advanced Western technology needed for powerful nuclear weapons. We might also create some confusion and distrust within the Iranian military and intelligence groups. The situation with Kenneth was just a small part of that plan. Adele would use Colonel Danny to create problems for important members in those Iranian groups. Danny's job to expose and deal with Kenneth would raise his own status. Adele also wanted to find any scientists who could be vulnerable to corruption or blackmail through things like drugs or alcohol. The colonel was in a good position to spot anyone weak because that was part of his job. Several individuals stood out. One was an alcoholic, and since many Iranians still drank alcohol despite its ban, Danny could easily make friends with him and provide him with drinks. There were others who were also easy targets for manipulation, which was helped by the way Iranian society worked. This was true for Dr. MRG, who soon found himself involved with a young man working for Adele without realizing it. Photos and videos of them together were captured, and the trap was set. Dr. Mizoguchi cooperated willingly, as he had his own reasons to oppose the current Iranian government and feared harsh punishment. The news was a mixed bag. 2 secret centrifuge facilities had been discovered, and they were now running. They were extracting materials at a rate that could produce about 150 pounds in 10 months. This was enough for one basic nuclear bomb, or could be used for several more advanced bombs if they got more technology. Kenneth tried his best, but he couldn't gather much information on his own. No one in Iran trusted him, especially Colonel Danny, who was still angry about what Jennifer had done to him. Interestingly, neither man knew that the other was also working for us. It was surprising that Kenneth was allowed to leave Iran that last time, but he brought enough materials with him to make it worthwhile. Plus, he was almost desperately claiming he was working on other interests of their nuclear scientists, such as fusion technology. Kenneth was quickly running low on funds. His plane was taken by the court as soon as he returned to New York. He tried to deal with his money problems publicly for a while, but then he became very quiet as he faced his growing worries. Often, rich people who face hard times are helped by their friends and family. There are not many billionaires in the world, around 1,300, and they usually stick together. But for some reason, no one helped Kenneth. The people from his agency had a part in that. They had to let him go. There were even some subtle threats made. Even wealthy people from China who cared about the U.S. economy didn't want to deal with investigations from the U.S. government or various agencies. Then, out of nowhere, Kenneth vanished. He stopped responding to calls and likely got rid of his phone. It was as if he had thrown it into the Hudson River. Though he lost much of his wealth, he probably still had a few million in cash, gold, or diamonds hidden away. He could live comfortably for a while, away from the spotlight, using cash only. He could also hire some unsavory characters with that money. The big question was he dangerous? What would he do for revenge against Kathy, Jennifer, or me? I wasn't too worried about Jennifer. She was smart and capable. But Kathy, who lived back home in Paducah, Kentucky, was someone I wanted to protect. I informed my father and brother to be cautious. I had stirred up trouble with some powerful men who were not very moral and often wanted to control others. They would seek revenge on anyone who got in their way. I had stopped some of their plans. My family lived in an area not well thought of, often labeled as flyover country. My brother worked as a sheriff's deputy and listened to my warnings. He had good friends who always looked out for each other at our parents' house. When a group tried to break into my parents' home, it ended badly for them. 2 were killed there, 1 shot by my mother with her shotgun. 2 more were hurt badly in a crash while trying to escape. They were hit on purpose by a sheriff's department truck, which couldn't be called just an accident. After we talked to the 2 that survived, we found out something surprising. That house wasn't picked randomly. Someone had paid them and promised more money after they kidnapped my parents and brought them back safely later that night. 2 well-dressed businessmen faced a terrible incident in a motel room. They were victims of a robbery that went horribly wrong, resulting in their deaths. The police who looked into this crime were shocked to find out that these men were actually agents from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. No one in the local area had known about their presence in Paducah. The DHS in Washington was unhappy and promised to seek justice, suspecting that the attackers were part of a local militia. At the time, I was heading to Chicago, which was 2 months after the events in Paris. Kathy had only stayed in a safe house for 2 weeks before it seemed safe for her to leave Washington. DC life there felt a bit like prison and was mostly dull. During those 2 weeks, Dr. Ruth visited her nearly every day. I encouraged Kathy to go back to her family in Chicago and to begin the divorce process with me. She cried and begged me not to make her go through with it. I felt the same way and pleaded with her to do it for her safety and our future. We both needed some space. I believed that she needed it too. One of the hardest parts about her leaving was that she wouldn't see Dr. Ruth anymore. I asked her to continue her therapy in Chicago. Dr. Ruth could suggest someone trusted so that Kathy could talk freely. It was important for her to understand why she had been unfaithful, how she really felt about me, and how my lies had affected her. She also needed to work through the stress from her relationships with Kenneth and me. She was right that she needed to fix things with her father and family. I regretted my role in creating that distance, especially since it could lead to revenge. Because of what happened with Kenneth, I asked her to go through with the divorce and to completely separate herself from me. I still loved her and always would, but love wasn't enough in the past, and we both needed to be sure it would be enough for our future together. We had to overcome our struggles and find happiness, even in the quiet moments. Kathy officially resigned from her law firm and went back home to start the divorce process. She didn't ask for any division of our belongings. We both agreed to keep what we already had. She left me the condo just as it was. Elaine and I decided that I would stay undercover a little longer while she set up a solid protection plan for me, just in case things got dangerous. We thought Kenneth wouldn't try to get back at us, but he disappeared, breaking our agreement. Soon, a video of us was posted online by some bad groups. They would sure notice it, and now Kenneth was wanted all over the world. Things were getting serious, and I felt that the attack on my family in Kentucky was just the first blow. I spent a day and a night with Kathy and her family, despite us being distant. I also had a deep talk with Kathy's dad. I warned him about the danger they could be facing, but I kept it vague. I urged him to do everything he could to keep his family safe but I didn't think he took me seriously. He didn't have a gun in Chicago, which has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. Maybe he thought that would keep them safe. It was hard for me to leave, but being near Kathy might attract danger. The next morning, we said a tearful but hopeful goodbye as I waited for my flight back. I tried to reach out to Elaine to set up some protection for Kathy, but I couldn't get in touch with her. I tried Jennifer, but she didn't answer either. Neither returned my messages before I got to D.C. When I landed at Dulles, 2 DHS agents arrested me, along with a group of officers. I was taken to a holding area and kept there without contact for 4 days. Finally, a mid-level manager came to talk to me. It was a strange meeting. "Jim, we got a tip that you are a foreign agent here illegally, so we had to check it out very carefully," he said. "Mr. William Johnson, no relation, by the way." I asked, "So, Bill, why didn't the FBI handle this?" "Oh, we involved the FBI, but I was ordered to keep you in custody and oversee the investigation. The good news is that you're cleared. Your paperwork shows you're just a low-level NSA analyst, an expert in Mideast languages. The really good news is that you're being moved to the CIA for a higher position." He handed me a card from my new manager and said, "You need to call him in 2 weeks. You'll also be on paid leave for the next 2 weeks." Then he looked serious and said, "I have some bad news about your personal life. Your estranged wife." I felt my heart drop. "Kathy?" I whispered. "Yes. Her family was attacked 2 days ago in a home invasion. Her mother was killed, and her father is in the hospital in a coma and very critical. And Kathy, she seems to be missing," he said. "The FBI and DHS are both trying to understand what happened and where Kathy is right now. I feel bad about what's going on and the tough situation you are in, but you can take a break starting now. You have 2 weeks to help your in-laws if you want." I felt like I was in a scary place, like I had no control. I acted upset, lost, and overwhelmed by my sadness. Bill put his hand on my shoulder and said I could take a few minutes. After that, someone would come to help me leave. They had taken my bags from my last flight, but I just nodded, not able to think clearly. It was hard to keep my anger in check. I was sure he knew about the plan. What really happened? Soldiers had lost their lives, similar to how some brave members of SEAL Team 6 died after achieving a big mission. I believed there were people inside who were working with Kenneth and the Iranians to ruin my attempts to slow down their nuclear plans, thinking it was a fair trade. I felt that Kathy and our families were just pawns in their game. I wondered if they had taken Elaine and Jennifer too, along with Adele and my other co-workers. I needed to get out of there fast, and I knew I had to be very careful. I could have been let go just to be caught or even killed in my vulnerable state. I had no weapons with me, and I doubted anyone there would give me one if I asked. They kindly offered to call a cab for me. It was late, around 9 p.m., and dark outside. I just stared at them and said no, that I would walk for a while and then take the metro. They insisted I should take a cab, warned me about crime in D.C. at night. I reassured them I would be fine and walked away. Sure enough, I saw a cab parked half a block away. As I walked toward it, the driver looked confused, probably waiting for a call from someone. With my head down, deep in thought, I looked up as if noticing the cab for the first time and gave a weak wave. The driver started his engine and came right over. I tossed my bags into the back seat, but instead of getting in back there, I opened the front door and slid into the passenger seat. He seemed surprised, started to talk, and I noticed him reaching for something in his waistband. I figured it was a weapon. He said I had to sit in the back, but when I smiled at him, I hit him hard in the face. He was stunned, so I easily got control of his gun. I hit him again with the gun to keep him dazed. Were there people watching right nearby, or did they think I would simply be a quiet victim locked in the back seat, ready to be taken wherever they wanted? I didn't see any other cars, especially vans, on the streets. So I pushed the cab driver into the back seat after searching him and checking that he had a gun. It looked like a nice weapon, something like a small pistol. Then I drove to my other apartment, not the condo. It was possible my enemies didn't know about it yet. They definitely knew about my condo, my main home address, and what used to be Kathy's. I started moving the cab driver around, and he looked dazed. Suddenly, a woman appeared to help me. It was Jennifer. I just nodded at her. "Hi, Jim. Who is this? A drunk cab driver?" I wasn't sure, but I needed to find out. I thought he had been sent to pick me up and take me somewhere I probably wouldn't want to go, but maybe she would want to go there. As we arrived at the apartment, the driver started to wake up and struggle. A quick hold and some pressure made him stop, and soon he was in the spare bedroom, tied up and silenced. I let him think for a moment. "Why are you here, Jen?" I asked. Elaine and I got a warning from someone. The higher-ups were really coming down hard on our agency. They didn't have all the names, but enough to make things difficult for us right now. I thought this would be a good place for me to stay hidden. Our phones still worked, but we had to be careful. We believed the NSA couldn't break our encrypted messages, but they could still find us easily. "Is your phone on?" I asked her. "Nope. The battery ran out while I was in jail, and I turned it off as soon as I got it back. I was held for some fake charges. I think someone high up decided to hand me over to Kenneth, or maybe our friends from Iran." "Did you hear about Kathy?" she asked. "Oh no, Jim. Kathy's missing. They think she was kidnapped. Her mom is gone and her dad is in a coma. Someone also tried to hurt my parents. They are okay for now, though. How do we contact Elaine?" "We meet at the food court in a different mall every other day. We'll decide based on how things look." I turned to the cab driver, who looked more awake now, and took off his gag. "Where were you taking me?" "You've got it all wrong," he said. "I was just going to take you where you wanted." I pulled out my small revolver and shot him in the knee. Then I used a pillow to muffle his cries until he stopped yelling. "You had 2 expensive guns on you," I said. We checked the cab, and neither of the back doors could be opened from the inside. The window between the front and back seats was very tough, even more than usual. "Now let's get to where the real questions begin. If you answer quickly and honestly, we'll take you with us, and you'll stay safe. The longer you wait, the less reason we have to help you." "So what was that address again?" He gave us the address, and we started driving. I was really worried about Kathy, but I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on what I had to do now. We were on our way to the address that the driver had given us. He was locked in the back seat. Jennifer was with me, and we were both armed. I had my M1911 pistol and a small backup gun, and Jennifer had the driver's Glock, plus whatever else she might have hidden. We were both dressed in jeans. Jen had her hair tied up and wore a cap. We discussed our plans and what we might do if things changed. The driver provided the address, but not much more information. We didn't have time for long planning. We decided that Jennifer would get out 2 blocks before the address. I would wait 10 minutes for her to find a good spot to keep an eye on things. If there were more than 4 people waiting for me, it could get tricky. Our main advantage was surprise. I was not supposed to be free when we arrived. After a short wait, I drove up and Jen was in plain view. We were in front of a warehouse with the garage door open. "No one's here," Jen said. We pulled the driver out and took him into the warehouse. He looked scared. "Why shouldn't I just end you now?" I asked quietly. He replied in a shaky voice. "Look, this is the place. I've picked up these guys before. I'm just a driver, not part of their group." "Who are they?" I asked. "Russians, I think," he said. "All I know are a couple of first names, Ivan and Dmitri. They always pay in cash, usually $500. This was my first $1,000 job, just taking people like you around." "Where's their spot?" I pressed. "This is it. They just call me when they need a ride," he explained. I had his phone and checked his call list. He pointed to a number. Jennifer and I talked quietly. "What do we do with him?" Jennifer asked. "I don't want to hurt him. Let's drop him off about a block from a hospital. That will give us time to head to a metro station while he finds help. He's not likely to call anyone on us right now," I suggested. "Then let's take a cab to Alexandria and get a hotel room. We can try to meet Alain tomorrow. He knows where my apartment is, but I think it's probably already been discovered. I expect that some tough guys will show up there soon. Someone must know I'm still free by now." "Do you have everything you need?" I asked Jennifer. "No, but I agree with you. We both need to stay hidden and keep our faces away from public cameras. If the NSA gets the go-ahead to find us, they'll use their powerful facial recognition tools on all the public camera footage from last night onwards. You wouldn't believe how quickly their supercomputers can analyze images now. They can almost do it in real time when they put it on high priority." "How are you fixed for money?" I asked. "I have a couple of thousand plus 2 identity credit cards, a Discover card, and a Visa. How about you?" "Just a few hundred on my personal cards, which isn't much." and that unlimited agency card that might be at risk. I can't use it until I talk to Elaine. Okay, I'll book us a room for 2 tonight at the Alexandria Best Western with my Susan Smith visa. We'll take separate cabs, and you stay outside to watch me go to our room. The Best Western had outside entries to the rooms. Once we got into the room, we talked for a while. I knew Jennifer was upset and scared. I was upset too, and a bit frightened. I was still very worried about Kathy. I had no idea who really had her and how they were treating her. Jennifer and I ended up sleeping together again. It was a way to comfort each other emotionally. It let her relax and feel safe for a bit, resting in a strong man's arms. At least for this one night, it also helped ease some of my own tension. But afterwards, I lay there feeling better physically, yet still lost in thought. I didn't know what I would do if Kathy was hurt again, or worse. I couldn't bear the thought that she might suffer because of my mistakes. Things had seemed so good for many years. I had a meaningful job that felt bigger than just me and a loving wife who meant the world to me. Yet I began to wonder if I had the right priorities all this time. Somehow, I had placed my country above my wife and even God. But what was my country? It was the people of the United States, just an idea based on the Constitution, no matter how complicated it was. If some parts of my country were now completely different from others, where did my true loyalties lie? And how had we not faced a terrible civil war already? Maybe my priorities should have been God, family, trusted friends, and then country. Humans have always lived in this kind of close-knit groups or tribes. For most of our history, about 190,000 out of 200,000 years, people have lived in small villages or hunting groups. Throughout history, many groups have been organized in a tribal manner. This is similar to how the mafia operates, which is like the way patrons used to support clients in the old Roman Empire. It also resembles how certain groups are formed by people who trust and care for one another, rather than by changing political leaders or people just looking out for their own careers. Most of these close relationships were built through tough times and shared disappointments over national issues, failed leadership, and battles that resulted in unnecessary injuries and deaths for brave men and women in service. The feeling of frustration grew when leaders seemed to make choices that any sensible person would see as wrong. Right now, I was feeling overwhelmed by problems. I remembered the original goal was to take care of the big issues, and here I was, weighed down by personal struggles. I really didn't like the idea of having to be a hero and solve everything on my own. In real life, those who try to go it alone often find they are not as successful as they hoped. Both humans and wolves are social creatures, and working together is key for survival and success. I realized I needed a team. Jennifer and Elaine would be essential, and hopefully, Elaine could help find others who could join us. I needed their support to have any chance of success. Right now, success meant bringing Kathy back safely and dealing with my dangerous enemies. I hadn't taken another person's life during my work in intelligence. I always remembered Gandalf's advice to Frodo about giving others a chance for redemption. Every person has the potential to make a significant impact on the world, even if we can't see it at the moment. The fact that Gollum lived instead of dying was crucial. It stopped Sauron from getting the ring, and it saved Frodo from being ruined by its power. I wondered if Kenneth could still have a significant positive role, even though it was hard to picture now, given his failure as an agent against Iran and the looming threat of a nuclear disaster. These thoughts helped me find some peace enough to sleep. I tried to stay logical and not let the sadness take over when thinking of Kathy and her parents. Senator Charles Rayburn, who was leading the opposition in the Senate Intelligence Committee, had an important meeting starting at 10 a.m. the next morning. The meeting took place at Senator Rayburn's farm in Northern Virginia. The farmhouse was big and nice, but it wasn't a mansion. Senator Rayburn had spent his life serving the public and wasn't extremely wealthy, though he was doing pretty well. He would likely become much richer after he retired, wrote a book, started giving speeches, and worked as a consultant. Also at the meeting were Senator Chance Reed from Nevada, Senate Minority Leader Elizabeth from California, House Minority Leader Jeb Jamieson, Secretary of Homeland Security Carolyn Nance, and the National Security Advisor to the President, Kenneth Turner. Usually, Kenneth would be the most important person in this meeting. Just weeks ago, he had given $1 million in campaign funds to all of these politicians, both legally and a bit unethically. He had also given much more to the current police, represented by his energetic advisors, Nance and Jameson. But now, Kenneth's money had shrunk from $1 million to under $3 million, making him seem almost poor. While Rayburn hosted the meeting, it was really NSA Carolyn Nance, as the closest advisor to the president, who was in charge. After everyone had their coffee served by the staff, she got straight to the point. "Kenneth, what happened? Can you tell us?" Kenneth, looking embarrassed, explained, "It was some people from your own intelligence agencies who did this." "What on earth? How did this happen? I was just trying to help this administration like you asked," he replied. "Is that true, Jeb?" Jeb looked a bit uneasy. He might have felt uncomfortable with the term boy since he was proud of being African American, which made him struggle with confidence, similar to the current president. "I'm working on it. This was a big surprise," he said. "It seems there are some rogue agents across a few agencies that are loosely working together on projects that aren't officially approved. We've spotted several of these individuals and taken action to manage them, basically putting them under close watch by trusted staff. We have especially focused on higher-level managers with access to security intel, budgets, and other key areas." "That sounds good, but how do I get my money back?" Kenneth asked. "Who is responsible?" questioned one of the others. "Jim Richardson, Kathy Richardson's husband. He works as a low-level analyst and interpreter at the NSA, but he doesn't seem to have a proper manager or office. It's rather odd, and we're still looking into it. Unfortunately, he has disappeared and may have gotten into serious trouble." It seemed that Kenneth's ex-wife, Kathy, and her family had been going through some tough times recently. "We didn't know all the details. Do you have any idea what's up with that, Kenneth?" Of course he didn't. Nothing during this meeting was being officially noted down. However, everyone present was recording it for their own safety. The basic rules had been set long ago: never admit to or discuss any real illegal actions. They only talked about general aims, needs, wants, broad plans, and legal methods. Everyone here wished for peace and happiness for everyone in the world. A perfect place for all. But the most important thing for no one in this room was to hold on to their power while trying to get more. This group was in a good position, and as the government gained more resources, so did they. After a moment of silence filled the room, Kenneth was still giving his intense look. Finally, National Security Advisor Nancy spoke up. "We can probably help you get some funds quickly, around $50 million from some newly available Iranian money. I assume you can't get that from Iran yourself. You saw that video online, right? I have many supporters and opponents there who are fierce. I still have some contacts in Iran's intelligence, but even they are cautious now. They won't take risks with their own dangerous people, the ones who act first and think later. What about the funds I've kept secret?" he asked. "Unfortunately, we have no record of anyone in the U.S. intelligence community controlling or seizing those accounts," Nancy replied. "This issue happened in Paris, and it might have been the French intelligence. I've tried to find out, but only got confusing responses. The French said if you could get someone in the Iranian government to claim you as one of their agents, we'd have a way to help you get your money back. But what can you offer us in return?" Nancy asked in a straightforward manner. "You know I have general contacts and skills that can be useful. You will continue to have my support in every way," Kenneth answered. They all understood this meant both financial help and whenever something needed to be handled that wasn't exactly legal. Kenneth had all the right connections. "What about the situation with Iran? They seem okay so far," Nancy directed her question to Jameson. Jeb replied, "As long as nothing goes public, they'll be fine. They still say the claims about them developing nuclear weapons are completely untrue, but they are getting frustrated that Congress hasn't approved the treaty yet." Rayburn chuckled. "We can't approve a treaty they haven't even signed. Apparently, they weren't going to sign it anytime soon. The president is in a good place right now. He's getting a lot of attention and feels proud of a nuclear arms deal. However, it's mostly talk and doesn't mean much. I'm controlling Congress enough so that he won't face impeachment. But do we really want Iran to have nuclear weapons?" Callie AOC spoke up. "Of course not, Charlie. We all want a world without nuclear weapons. But when countries have nuclear arms, it sometimes helps keep peace, especially between countries with different beliefs and values. If Iran gets its own nuclear weapons, it might lead to less angry talk and support for terrible actions." I have many studies that show this is just normal behavior for men, she continued. It's based on science, and you can't argue with that. It's a shame so many voters don't get science anymore. Everyone nodded along, but Rayburn and Kenneth weren't convinced. Kenneth didn't care much about it. What Kenneth really wanted was his own money and power back. He was also curious about who was bothering Jim and Kathy Richardson. It wasn't him. He would be fine not seeing any of them, especially Jennifer, ever again. The worst day for him was when he first noticed Kathy showing off. He knew she was married, which made it more interesting back then. He liked the thrill of being with another man's wife, but now he regretted it. Kenneth realized his troubles began with personal grudges. Jim had taken a risk, and now Kenneth felt a bit broken. He hated bowing down to lower-ranked politicians. If he ever got some funds again, like the promised $50 million, he would be smarter about his business and relationships. Maybe he would just stick to simpler dating options with young women who offered a fun and easygoing experience instead of risking trouble with angry husbands. That man handled his bodyguards like they were nothing. Kenneth decided to do a little investigation himself. He had some good contacts in Chicago, and one group he knew was likely connected to the mob. He wanted them to look into Kathy. Now it was time to check on Jim's side, too. Jennifer and I both woke up early and felt pretty good. We didn't feel awkward about our night before, but we had a lot on our minds this morning. So, instead of taking our time, we quickly got ready, showered, and dressed. Then, we carefully left the room, trying not to attract any attention. We decided to walk to a small cafe nearby for breakfast. That day, we were also supposed to meet Elaine at the Landmark Mall in Alexandria. We took separate cabs to the mall. I arrived around 11 a.m. and spent some time shopping while looking out for any signs of trouble. At about 11:30, I saw Jennifer. We both seemed to be near the food court, and I noticed she had a shopping bag with something inside. Soon after, we spotted Elaine doing her own shopping. I kept an eye on things for about 10 minutes while they got their food and sat down at a table in the food court. Everything felt normal, so I grabbed a sandwich and joined them. Elaine said, "Hi, Jim. Jennifer just told me about Kathy, and I'm really sorry. This is the first I'm hearing about it." "Of course, I'll help however I can," I replied. "Thank you, Elaine. I really appreciate it. But what happened? Why are we all in trouble now?" Elaine sighed and explained, "The head of Cowboy's work don't want this kind of trouble. They looked at the first report about the Kenneth project, and what you found out was shocking. Someone high up got very angry and started asking questions. They wanted to know everybody involved." She continued, "The details of the report were classified and many names were hidden or changed, but this was serious and we all got a warning to stay out of sight." I felt confused. "I don't understand. We thought we were doing something good." Elaine added, "Well, it seems someone is upset about the situation. Things are changing with Iran, but right now Kathy is missing and I need to find her." Elaine was a bit angry. "Okay, let's get back to work. I can still help a lot, especially if Cowboy is safe enough to cooperate. Things will be a bit slower now, and we need to be very cautious. They let you go after catching you, and I heard that some people who speak Russian might have tried to grab you," Elaine said. Jennifer nodded in agreement. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "Just at some motels for now," Jennifer said. "Forget that. Let's go to my place," I suggested. "It's much safer. Cowboy should stop by tonight. He spends most nights with me now. That's part of my cover. Sometimes we do share a bed. Maybe tonight we can all come up with a plan together." It felt nice to come back inside after being out in the cold and to have real friends and allies with me, working as a team again. I was quite impatient waiting for Rob to arrive tonight. Elaine had some information for Jennifer and me. We really wanted to look into the latest news about Kenneth's quick financial downfall and then his sudden disappearance, but there wasn't much to find. Interestingly, all official searches by the NSA for him stopped right after that TSA report came out about his involvement in getting advanced technology for Iran. Cowboy Rob drove in just after 9 p.m. He pulled his car into the garage and walked in confidently. "Hi, Jim. Hi, Jennifer." He shook my hand and gave Jennifer a hug. "Are you both doing okay?" Jennifer nodded and smiled, looking strong. I noticed she had a bit of shine in her eyes. "Do you know about Kathy?" I asked. "Yes, Jim. I found out today. I'm sorry about it, and I've started looking into it quietly. No one above me seems interested. I don't even think the FBI cares much except for a little bit of concern. It's odd. Benjamin Rosenbaum was a wealthy man, but there's so little worry about what happened to him and his family. Something feels off. But the agency's situation is getting clearer. My direct boss has been sidelined. He's going to step back and help from outside now. I think I'm still safe. I still have many important connections, and I'm checking each one carefully. Our biggest danger is betrayal. If someone is forced to reveal names of everyone they know or suspect is part of our group, we could be in serious trouble. I don't know who is leading this internal investigation, but it seems to be someone high up in the DHS Secretary's office. That means the NSA, CIA, and FBI are all being looked into. Someone really wants to find out who is involved in the Kenneth project. So far, I haven't heard of anyone giving away key details, but you three need to stay cautious and under the radar. It's not clear if they know about your involvement, Jim, but the signs now suggest they might. Where could they have heard that? It must have come from Kenneth. Maybe he mentioned you and Kathy by name to someone on a cell phone or through NSA surveillance. This also means Jennifer could be at risk too. What can we do? Any ideas? Rob asked. Well, we have an address and a cell phone number to start with. The warehouse the taxi driver took us to. Plus, I kept the taxi driver's phone. I can pass this over to you for more checking and maybe next steps. Can you somehow get the NSA resources working for us again? Yes, I have at least one person who will take on a task that isn't officially allowed, and he seems smart enough to keep it hidden. I'll start looking into that address and every phone number in this guy's phone. I really need to find out where that guy Kenneth is. I can't believe he just retired and disappeared. Can you start a new search for him at the NSA? Probably not. We will need to be careful since he was being watched closely until it all officially stopped. There might still be some alerts in the system. If anyone starts it again, I'll ask our tech expert if he can spot and bypass the digital alerts. It's him. I was really getting annoyed. It seemed like we were going to have to wait a lot longer than I expected. Is that card still good for me to use? Yes, but keep it saved for later. Elaine has a package for you and Jennifer. It has 4 complete sets of new IDs, passports, and 3 credit cards each in case you need to travel or work on your own. What about our phones? Don't use them. Don't turn them back on. But hang on to them for now. Here are some special phones that could be useful. Their systems have been changed. They will always show your location as being about 300 to 400 miles away in the same direction. These phones are copies of your current NSA phones, but they only use a special feature for making calls and won't receive any calls or connect to local cell towers. Just use them to check your voicemails, messages, and emails. Use them in crowded public places. There might be some excitement when Jim checks for messages. Just move away quickly and try to avoid any public cameras while using some kind of disguise. The NSA will get information from the phone and try to locate it as closely as possible. You don't even have to worry about turning your phone off since they are never in idle mode. Connect it to the network like regular phones. Just buy some regular prepaid burner phones for calling each other and switch them out after every call to avoid being traced. Any questions? I was really tempted to check for any messages right away. Right now, it felt like Kenneth and I were ships trying to find each other in the dark. That was about all we could cover that night. This was a fairly large suburban house where Jen and I had separate bedrooms. I think we both just needed some time alone to think tonight. The choice to tell Kathy about my real job was on my mind. Could we have handled everything better? Something still felt off. Kenneth appeared to be just another wealthy man surrounded by influential friends. But who were his closest political allies, especially those involved with the Iran deal? Was he actually working with someone in the government along with Colonel Mann, Danny, and others from Iran? Maybe this whole lobbying effort was just a front, like the Russians might say, a way to hide his real connections with important people in the government. And why had my parents been targeted for kidnapping? That's what my brother told me. Now Kathy had been taken too. If it was just because of me, why not hurt my parents and her parents as well? Why hadn't I been harmed when I was let go from that DHS detention? A simple drive-by shooting could have ended me. We could have eliminated Kenneth any time, but we needed him for information. Did someone else want to get something from me too? What if they wanted to silence me about what I knew about Iran's ongoing nuclear weapons program? What if they wanted to find out who else was involved? Everyone I knew, all the agents, Adele, the brave people who went into Iran despite the risks, my new friends? What if the price to get Kathy back was for me to betray everyone? What would I do then? It would be easy to think things through. They might just get fired from their jobs. No big deal. But it was a long night for me. I dozed off a little but kept waking with anxiety. Nightmares shadowed my thoughts. I finally gave up on sleep, showered, and got dressed by 5:30 a.m. I headed to the kitchen, fiddling around and starting the coffee. About half an hour later, Rob came in to start his day. I felt torn but decided to share my worries with him. We brainstormed and looked at different scenarios. His final advice was to do whatever it took to keep Kathy safe. It was best to keep Jen and Elaine in the loop as little as possible. Once Kathy was safe, then we could figure out the next steps. Or maybe Kenneth and his Iranian associates were looking for their kind of revenge. Dealing with the unknown felt like trying to swim in quicksand while carrying a heavy load. Rob left for work at 7 a.m. I heard Elaine and Jennifer waking up, so I began making breakfast for everyone. We each had special contacts to check on as the day went by. I had an email address for Adele and wrote a careful message, trying to warn him without being too direct. Around noon, we all left separately for different public places, like bars and restaurants. After lunch, when we were ready to leave, we used our special phones to check for messages, voicemails, or emails. I found some interesting things. One voicemail was from my new CIA boss. He introduced himself and mentioned that I was on 2 weeks of special leave. He asked me to call him in a day or so to stay updated. But another voicemail made my heart race. Call me at 312-555-8765. It's very important. He said I should call soon, or it might be too late. The voice had a Russian accent, but it wasn't Northern Russian, maybe from Dagestan, and 312 was a Chicago area code. After leaving the bar and the unknown stranger, I went to a coffee shop and ordered coffee and a muffin. I sat down at one of the computers and began searching online. I grabbed one of my burner phones and called the 312 number. "I'm returning your call. What do you want before it's too late?" I asked as calmly as I could. "Please give me another number and I'll call you right back." I gave him another burner phone number and it rang just seconds later. "Yes," I answered. "If you care about your wife, you will help us. Yes or no?" he said. "Yes, but I need proof first." "Hold on. Hello?" It was Kathy's voice, sounding small and scared. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked. "Yes, but I'm worried about my parents. I think they were hurt when those people took me." I started to comfort her, but the other voice interrupted. "She's alive and safe for now. If she stays that way is up to you. Will you cooperate?" "What do you want?" I asked. "Call your new CIA manager and do everything he tells you to do, that's all." "When will I get Kathy back? How will I know you're serious?" "We will know. The sooner you act, the sooner we'll let her go." "Can I talk to Kathy again?" I asked. "No, you promised to cooperate. Don't break your word. Goodbye. We won't talk again. Either you help us, or you can say your goodbyes to Kathy. That would be sad. She is a truly wonderful woman." Then the line went dead. I sat there thinking for a few minutes. I quickly called another burner phone and then called my CIA boss on my official phone. "Bradley Gilbert," he answered. "Hello, Jim," I said, since he recognized my caller ID. "I got your message and wanted to check in." "Great. Would you like to end your leave and get to work?" "Yes, I'd like to do that as soon as I can." "Good. Let's meet this afternoon at 3 p.m. Can you make it to this address?" It was a residential address in Bethesda. "I think I can be there," I replied. "I don't need to say how important it is to keep things private, right? This involves national security and some personal matters for you. I understand that. I'm ready to meet you and finish this job." I turned off my work phone again. Things were getting complicated. Was Bradley part of a secret group in the U.S. intelligence community? Was he just another traitor working with Russians for reasons I didn't know? If that was the case, regular NSA or FBI agents might track my personal phone and find me. I wasn't sure if Gilbert could help me out of that mess. Everything was becoming even stranger. The best option now was to meet Bradley. Bradley was a character. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed around 175 pounds. He dressed well and looked polished for someone in his position at the CIA. He was definitely more attractive than I was, in a traditional way. He had a square jaw, blue eyes, a straight nose, and thick light brown hair. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe around 36. He carried himself with the confidence of someone from a wealthy background, like he had all the right social connections. He smirked as he looked me over. His handshake was a bit too strong, and his gaze felt more challenging than friendly. He knew he came off as cocky, and it didn't bother him one bit. I sensed our mutual dislike right away, and I figured he thought it gave him an edge. "I'm glad you could start helping me with this issue right away," he said. "What do you want, exactly?" "Oh, don't act defensive. I don't blame you at all. You can't really know how serious things are internationally right now. Only the highest people in our government fully understand and can make the right decisions far beyond your role," he continued, looking down on me. "Even you can see this, can't you? You and your friends seem to be getting in the way of important matters. It's time for you all to step back completely, and nothing you've found should ever be revealed to the public." "Will that include my mother-in-law coming back to life?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. Bradley's face turned a bit red, and I could see anger in his eyes. But what was done, and worrying didn't help now. It was never okay for anyone to get hurt. We just needed to make sure no more harm came to anyone. "Please be reasonable," I said. "Yeah, I'll be reasonable," he replied. I wondered if he would always feel that way. So I shared what I knew about Cowboy Rob. I didn't even know his last name. I mentioned Jennifer Smith and Elaine, too, giving him their phone numbers. I couldn't tell him where they lived, though. For now, I was on the run alone since I got out of that terrible place the other night. I talked about Adele and anyone else I could remember, sharing as much detail as I could. I was telling him everything I knew. When would my own worries be solved? "I hoped in a day or two. I just need to check your info and confirm a few things," he said. I wanted to believe he was being honest. "I hope you are too," I replied. Deep down, I wasn't sure he was honest, and I knew I hadn't been either. Honestly, I felt like I might have to take action against someone soon, maybe even against this guy. "Let's see," Kenneth sighed. It was clear I wasn't getting what I had been promised, that $50 million wasn't coming, and I wasn't likely to get any money at all. The important people weren't talking to me anymore. I only got people who avoided giving me clear answers. Forget it. I still had about $3 million left, all in cash. With $3 million, I could still make some moves, especially with my contacts in the underworld, both here and abroad. Those people had become my enemies, even more than the Richardsons, Jim and Kathy, who had started my troubles. They might be moving into the enemy of my enemy as my friend category, but I couldn't be sure yet. I started my own digging into things. First, I noticed something odd. There was nothing in the news or even on strange blogs about my efforts to help Iran with their nuclear work. Was Jim Richardson part of some secret agency? What about his wife, Kathy, and Jennifer Smith? Were they fooling me? They seemed to have some support behind them. Well, Jeb Jameson confirmed some of that. He was the one holding back the information. So, who had taken Kathy? Was it someone working with Jeb? He even asked me about that. If I could find Kathy and talk to her captors, I might get some answers, depending on how many layers of control were at play. But why take Kathy? I didn't think she was worth much all on her own. Jeb had a lot of secret knowledge and connections in the U.S. intelligence community. He likely already knew everything Kathy knew, or the FBI could just ask her. Honestly, I didn't care about her information, or about Iran, or Colonel Moss, or Danny. It all seemed pointless. Even though Kathy and Jim were going through a divorce, maybe having Kathy in my corner would give me some advantage over Jim. Jeb had mentioned that the operation against me was authorized but done by rogue agents. Jim was one of those rogue agents, so simply asking him everything might not make him fully cooperative. It felt complicated and a bit pointless. I didn't really care about politics, religion, or any of those issues. Just like my father had taught me, I focused on living well by making and spending money. My dad, Kenneth Turner Jr., was quite wealthy. He gave me my first $50 million when I graduated from Princeton with a business degree at 22. He made his money by importing and exporting all kinds of goods. He was a big supporter of free trade because it helped his main business, which dealt mostly with gray and black market items, run smoothly. He'd often said, "If you want to be really wealthy, look to third world countries for your chances." He claimed the money was easier to get there with fewer restrictions on business. He believed that the cultures where people had to pay off officials were more honest than in wealthier countries, where endless laws and taxes made life difficult. And he was right. I already had at least $500 million in total assets, thanks to my contacts in Iran. Marrying Kathy and leveraging that connection, along with her own wealth, could help me reach my goal of becoming a billionaire. I wanted that power and comfort. I was living large, just like my dad was known to. He enjoyed life and had many affairs, while my mom accepted it. They never divorced and always shared a home, even when my dad had his other women around. Maybe someday I'd consider marriage myself, other than my business marriage with Farah. But honestly, why bother? Being rich and attractive felt good enough. I was rich, and that made it easy to attract as many women as I wanted. The idea of being with just one woman for more than a week never crossed my mind. Not even with Kathy. She was one of the best, but she had her moments. Like that time she kicked me where it hurt. Why did she do that? It's complicated. I thought she enjoyed our dynamic, but I guess I was wrong. She wasn't honest with me. Instead of talking, she chose to spy on me. It's funny to think about now, but now I wasn't so wealthy anymore. Farah took her money and a lot of mine, too. My so-called friends were turning their backs on me. Me, who always treated people fairly. Well, I knew it was time to get back to work. If I could figure out what was really happening, maybe I could turn things around. I was still young, after all. The team I had in Chicago was good. They were looking into Kathy's disappearance, and I hoped to hear something soon. A week passed, but Kathy was still missing. I was making some progress, but it felt like I was still in the dark. Then Brad called me on the special phone he had given me when we first met. It was a government phone, and I found myself back at that same suburban house. It felt like a rookie mistake. Brad sounded upset. "Where's Kathy?" he asked. I sighed. "Your information isn't adding up. We haven't found anyone you mentioned. You need to bring in Rob and Elaine and Jennifer and do it fast." "How can I do that? I don't even know where they are, and I'm being chased by the NSA and FBI. "Arnie, you have to stay low, but you need to figure this out." "All right," I replied, feeling frustrated. Then he handed me his tablet. "I have a video for you." I took a deep breath and pressed play. It showed Kathy, looking hurt and in pain. I watched the whole thing without showing any emotion. "Did you let this happen?" I asked softly. "Listen, I can't control what they do. I'm just following orders. Please help me." He didn't understand. He still believed he was safe in his perfect little world. Poor guy. Some of my allies were now in the US, working with me, Jennifer, and Alain, who was calling the shots. "But why?" I asked him calmly. He smirked again. "I can't tell you that. It's secret. I just do what I have to, okay? Can I make a quick call?" "Sure. Do you really think you'll come out of this okay?" He looked worried for a moment. "Don't do anything foolish. We're being watched. There are armed guards right outside. If something happens to you, Kathy will be in trouble too. That's just how it is." Armed guards were here. I finished my call and handed my phone to him. "Brad?" I heard a shaky, scared voice. "Carla!" Brad's face went pale. "Who are these men? They said they might hurt me because of what you're doing. What are you doing, Brad? Please don't let them hurt me and Carla." Mrs. Bradley Gilbert started to cry. The call ended there. Brad sat frozen, then pressed a hidden button for help and shouted for his guards. I slowly pulled out my small gun. Brad looked at it like it was dangerous. I carefully shot him in the foot. He gasped in pain, shocked. I searched him and took his gun away, then slapped him hard. "Focus. Your wife might be okay. And your daughters, Kimberly, who's 14, and Chastain, who's 12. They might be safe, but you are mine now. Your life depends on how you answer my questions." "Who is doing this and why?" Brad started to cry. I don't know. I just follow orders. Direct orders from Carlos Herrera. Dax, my foot hurts so much." "You report to the director at the CIA for this, right? He's a family friend who got you this job, but he doesn't manage you directly." "His current title is Director of National Clandestine Services," Brad said. "Forget his title. He runs operations at the CIA, not intelligence. Does he know he shouldn't be doing this in the US? Does anyone else at the CIA know what you're doing?" "Just my security team, but they don't have any audio of our talks." "Wow, did you get rid of all of them?" "You'll find out. Focus on your wife's safety. She could be a future victim, but she won't be harmed first. Not like my wife. I'm sorry, I can't control it. Herrera must control the people who have Kathy. I can't believe he doesn't. And you don't know who they are or where Kathy is now. I'm sorry, I really am. Your wife and kids will stay safe as long as Kathy is okay, or until she's hurt again, or until I'm gone. You better convince Herrera to help. No one should ever hurt my wife again, and you need to be extra careful when you're cleaning your gun next time, because next time you might hurt yourself badly. You have 24 hours to set up a meeting for me with Herrera. Tell him I'll be bringing either Elaine or Rob with me. Say whatever you need to, but make that meeting happen. Just not in Langley. He'll likely go along with it since all this is wrong in more ways than one. You've got 24 hours or you won't hear from me again. And what about your wife and daughters? I'll find a way to sell them to someone terrible if I don't get what I ask for. I'll call you to discuss the meeting soon. Don't mess with me any further. You're way out of your league here. It's not a joke. I'm completely serious, and so are my friends. This is about honor. Not that you would understand that. All of Herrera's guards, including the ones I saw following me after our first meeting, have vanished. We had them secured at the safe house in the country where Kathy was kept after she got back from Paris. That house has a strong room in the basement for tough questioning, but it was almost full already. Now, let's check on Kathy. I guess I really was at the lowest point in my life right now. I had just been attacked and beaten by 3 cruel men who spoke Russian and seemed to hate both Jews and women, which might explain why they hurt me. They recorded the attack, probably to share it with someone else. I was also extremely worried about my parents. I knew they had been hurt while trying to fight off the attackers in our home. Those men had grabbed me, injected something into me, and pulled me out of our house in Highland Park into a waiting van. I was also worried about Jim. It had been about 8 days since I was taken, and I remembered his warning about Kenneth's revenge, but this didn't seem like Kenneth's style. Wouldn't he have shown up by now to gloat or humiliate me in person? The video could have been sent to him, but this didn't seem like something Kenneth would do. He liked to be there in person with women who were submissive. But who else could be behind this and why? The Iranians? Someone looking to use me against Jim? Just a kidnapping for money? Or someone wanting revenge or to get leverage over my dad? My dad mainly does corporate law, not criminal law or family issues. He is doing well and getting close to rich, but not incredibly wealthy. At least I knew Jim knew I was alive from that one call I received. I thought I heard the leader tell Jim to call someone else, and then it was just a long stretch of boring fear until the beating started. That's when the attack happened. I wanted to believe that Jim was trying his best, but I was starting to doubt it. I felt hopeless and very upset. My body ached, and I was in pain, but I knew better than to ask anything from my cruel captors. Eventually, I fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I was surprised to get a good breakfast. They even gave me coffee and aspirin. What did this mean? Was I about to be set free? Had Jim done what they wanted? Or was this a trick to lift my spirits just to bring me down again? Lunch was also good, even better than before, but they didn't offer any more aspirin. I was starting to feel a bit better, but my face hurt more than anywhere else. I didn't want to think about how I looked after all this time. After lunch, I started to doze off again. Suddenly, I was jolted awake. What was that noise? I wrapped the blanket around me and my heart raced. Did I hear something? Were they coming to hurt me again? I heard shouting, then gunshots. The door flew open and a tall man armed with a gun stood there looking at me. Was that Kathy Richardson? Yes, I said carefully. Hi, he smiled. Kenneth says hello, let's get you out of here. We found your clothes. I was naked, but I held the blanket tightly around me as he took me upstairs. I realized I had been kept in a basement. When I saw the bodies of a couple of my captors, now lifeless, I felt a shiver run down my spine. There were 4 or 5 other men around, all carrying handguns. They looked casual, not wearing uniforms or anything like that. They were checking the bodies, collecting guns, wallets, and phones. Some of them were searching for papers and computers. I was given some privacy to get dressed in a bedroom upstairs where my clothes were found. And then we left. We were in what looked like a farmhouse out in the countryside. As I got into a Jeep Cherokee with the big guy and a driver, I saw one more body slumped over a car. I noticed that some injured people, maybe even dead, were being loaded into another vehicle. Did I cause all this? A wave of guilt washed over me. I know your father, Ben Rosenbaum. the man said with a friendly smile. "Who are you? I thought Kenneth sent you. Is he working with my dad?" "You can call me Ali." "No, not Ali," he chuckled. "I know your dad because his law firm helped me once, and I sometimes do jobs for him. We're all private investigators and also do security work. We're here for Kenneth, but we're also helping your dad because he's a good man, and I know he cares about you. He's still in a coma, but I heard he's getting better and may be okay soon. I'm sorry about your mom." "Mom?" My heart sank. I remembered that she died the night they took me, a knife in her hand, but I knew this was no comfort for me. "I'll be quiet now for as long as you want. How do you know him from camp?" "Bisher Avildsen, Vera Shalom." I was surprised, but I recognized those comforting Yiddish words. "May GD comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem." Clearly, this man was Jewish, too. Suddenly, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was no longer worried about meeting Kenneth again as long as he was by my side. I understood that he respected our silence as a way to show support and comfort for those grieving. I was just starting my own time of mourning. We all stayed quiet for at least the next half hour. I cried for my lost mother, my father who was still in the hospital, my lost husband, and the children I never had with Jim. I felt like I was more like Job than Esther. I felt so guilty and ashamed because it all came from my own foolish choices. It was like I was throwing a tantrum. Me, adultery. It hadn't been that long ago, but it felt like ages. Finally, I sighed and asked, "I'm not done mourning, but what on earth is happening? Do you know anything about who took me?" "Why? What about my husband Jim, and why is Kenneth involved?" "Kenneth keeps his thoughts to himself. I'm not sure how he found out about what happened to your family, but the very next day he asked us to find out everything we could. We have good connections with local and state police, the FBI, and some shady characters in different places. We got lucky. The Chicago PD and FBI looked into it right away, but then the next day, they dropped the case. The FBI seemed to act like they were following a secret role, while the CPD treated it like an old case. It was really odd, and some of the detectives were frustrated and couldn't believe it. Then silence. We tried to gather information but heard nothing until just a couple of days ago. Someone with a Russian accent was complaining about things he shouldn't have in a public place, acting like he knew too much. We found out about it and tracked him down at a bar. After a few hours of serious talk, he finally told us about a farmhouse, but he couldn't give us an address. He only knew where it was. He wasn't even sure what was there, just that it was important. We decided to investigate, and luckily we brought enough people with us. Unfortunately, none of the men in the house are alive now, but we have their phones, IDs, and other things they left behind. We'll review everything over the next day or so. Maybe we can figure out who they are and what they were planning. So, what happens next? Where are we going? Are you taking me to Kenneth first? How are you feeling? Do you need anything for pain? Maybe some medicine? I started to feel embarrassed thinking about how I must look to this kind man. I probably looked pretty rough, but honestly, I didn't feel too bad. I knew I needed to see a doctor soon, just to be safe. I didn't want to tell him about what I'd just been through. He wasn't a police officer or anything like that, and I really didn't know him well. "If you need anything right away, let me know. We can stop for drinks, food, or medicine. We're heading to one of our safe houses. They have what we need. It's stocked with the basics. I'll take you to Kenneth, but only if you want me to. I can tell you're unsure. I'm not sure Kenneth is that great of a person. He's a friend of mine, and my husband's too. The last time I saw Kenneth, things got pretty rough." Long story short, Kenneth was involved in something messy, and my husband didn't like it. Those people getting dangerous weapons, that scares me. Can you reach your husband? Do you have a phone? I knew Jim's number by heart. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. "Jim, it's me. I got away. Call me back at this number, 312-555-4876. I love you, and I can't wait to see you again." "So, where are we going now?" "Back to the city, Chicago. That's where the safe house is. You should probably stay with me for a while. It's safer until we hear from your husband." "Do you want me to tell Kenneth about you?" That was the big question. "Yes, please let me talk to him." "Okay, hold on." He pressed a button on his phone. "Hey, it's me. I've got someone who wants to speak with you." "Kenneth? It's Kathy. Allie got me out. Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay, but I'll manage. What do you have to do with all of this? You better be honest with me. I know you might be upset with me now, but I didn't cause the kidnapping. I'm just really glad Ali and his team rescued you. We need to talk. It's important that you, Jim, and even Jennifer are involved. I might have answers and we can figure this out together. I'm really sorry about your dad and mom. I didn't know what was going to happen. I won't meet with you unless Jim and Jen are there too. We need to sort things out. Can you call Jim? I think Jim is off the grid right now, trying to stay safe. I am too. Everything has gotten really strange. I'm worried that things have gone beyond just politics and money. Honestly, money was always my main concern. Ali has my contact information. I will try to reach Jim. But you have a better chance than I do. Let Ali know as soon as you hear something. Are you planning to stay with Ali for a while? That might be a good idea. He knows what he's doing. Kenneth, you need to know that if you're trying to play games with Jim at all, he will not hold back. And it won't be pretty. I believe that, Kathy. I admit he really scared me the last time we were all together. I'm being as honest as I can with you now. And also, Kathy, I truly apologize for how I treated you. You might think it's just an excuse, but I really thought you enjoyed our fun times as much as I did. I know I can be a jerk and a fool, but surprisingly, many women seem to like me just fine. I really thought you felt the same way. I was almost shocked and speechless. Then I seriously started to wonder if I was just being foolish. And then I almost laughed. Your apology is accepted. I finally moved on. Don't ever make that same mistake with me or any other woman again without thinking first. I stopped laughing. I know I'm not innocent either. I let myself get involved and I put up with your disrespectful behavior. You're messed up, but I just hope you're not crazy. Because if you are, things won't end well for you. I'm really upset, and if Jim isn't yet, he will be as soon as I tell him some things. We'll keep in touch. I hung up and almost threw my phone at Ali, but I just handed it to him instead. Then I felt embarrassed about what I had shared with him about my past. What must he think of me? Why did I care? Talking about my past with another man right after I told my husband I loved him in my voicemail? Honestly, it wasn't really his business. Ali was very polite and just ignored it. You'd better not make me angry or your husband, Jim, I guess. Was Kenneth really that afraid? If he has any sense, he should be. My husband is usually one of the kindest people you could meet, but there is another side to him. More like the Hulk than the gentle guy everyone knows. Honestly, you'd have to see it to believe it. Just a little advice. Don't go looking for it. All right, Mrs. Richardson. I finally managed a normal laugh. I didn't mean to scare you, Ali. It's Kathy, and you'd better remember that. I jokingly punched his arm. Maybe I was losing it. Just like that, I felt sad again, and tears came, sending us back into that quiet morning. Before I knew it, I was sound asleep. Now let's check in on Jim. The next day around noon, I was sitting in a simple bar that had a decent lunch menu. It was busy enough that I could make some important calls. I pulled out my special blue phone and checked for messages. I found a voicemail. Kathy was free. My heart raced with excitement, but then I felt a wave of worry. I realized I couldn't back away from this situation now. It had turned into an all-or-nothing scenario. One of us would win and the other would lose. I wished I knew who I was up against. I quickly left my unfinished lunch and stepped outside onto the bustling city street. I took out a spare phone and called the number Kathy had left. A man answered. I'm looking for a woman who gave me this number. No names, please. I'm her husband, he said. After what felt like a long wait, a tired voice came on the line. Hi, honey. It's me, your husband. No names, okay? I heard a small gasp, and I loved hearing her voice. Hello, are you okay? I was so scared and worried. Her sniffing made my heart ache. I felt like I had let her down. I'm okay now that you are safe. Please tell me you're all right. I tried not to cry, but my voice was shaky. I think so. Some kind people helped me. They work for my good buddy on the plane to Paris. Do you understand? I asked. Yes, I think so, but you should talk to him soon. I heard her speak to someone briefly, and then she gave me another number. Honey, I'm fine, but the situation is tricky and dangerous for both of us. I really want to come to you, but it's not safe right now. Stay hidden and stay safe. Is this phone the one you used to leave me the voicemail? I asked. Yes. Then it needs to be turned off and thrown away as soon as we finish this call. Can you use another phone? A quick conversation happened on her end. Yes, I have another one. Okay, call me back at this number, I said. But then I hesitated. Actually, it's still too risky right now. Let me think. I was going to give her a number for another spare phone. I was sure my official phone had tracking and that they were keeping tabs on all calls and messages. Even though the government's technology was impressive, it wasn't perfect. They couldn't really listen to everything in real time, but they could still be watching for anything suspicious. There were millions of phone calls happening every minute in the USA. If someone was listening closely, they might be overhearing all my conversations, especially the ones I had with Kathy. Any phone numbers or emails I shared with her could easily be tracked more closely. To stay safe, we would need to use secret ways to communicate, or people who wouldn't be recognized. For now, just keep a low profile. Tell your friends to get some prepaid phones. You can send me messages or emails through my agency phone number, but only until those phones are no longer safe. Make sure to send just one message at a time from a public place. After you send a message, destroy the phone right away. Try to be careful and hidden in your messages. Never call me from where you're actually hiding. Some dangerous people want to find you because of me. I feel terrible for bringing you into this situation. I shouldn't have tried to use you like I did. I will find ways to talk to you and keep you safe. Just knowing you are away from those bad people makes me happier than I have been in a long time. I love you, and that won't change. Sometimes love means saying sorry, and I'm truly sorry. I can't believe you might still want to talk to me after all this, and I regret that too. Please stop saying things like that. You don't get to control how I feel or who I love. I promise I will always tell you the truth from now on. I do love you and still feel deeply for you. And I don't want to hear any negative comments. Now stop worrying about me and focus on what you need to do. I'll be here waiting. I might not be very patient, but I'll take care of myself. More careful than you, my silly husband. I got your message. Goodbye, love. We will see each other soon if things go well. Please destroy that phone you used right away. Think about moving far from where you are now. For now, treat the whole US government like they are against you. I hope your new friends can handle that. Goodbye, dear. I hung up. At least she was safe now. I quickly called Kenneth using my secure phone. Hey there, I was expecting your call, I said. Are you still working for the people in charge? I have to take care of my responsibilities, he replied. But maybe I'm not as committed as before. We need to meet and sort out these issues for everyone's sake. Where are you right now? I'll be at the Watergate for the next week. You can stop by any time. Right, like that's going to happen. But I will come. We need to talk seriously. I expect you will. You've already frightened me enough and caused a lot of problems. It's time to let go of the past and work toward a better future. We need to make sure families are safe again. I was serious about what I said. Soon, was all I could reply before hanging up. When I thought about family, I meant Kathy and her relatives as well as the family tied to my almost finished marriage. I thought maybe I could ask Kenneth to help me talk to Kathy. It wouldn't be easy. I couldn't just walk into the Watergate Hotel and ask for Kenneth. But I had a friend who was great at disguises, and he might have a way in. Nobody even knew Kenneth was in the US right now. I decided to call Elaine next. I used a disposable phone to contact her. We need to meet this afternoon, I said. Let's gather everyone who can come at your place. Maybe around 6 o'clock. Okay, bye? Then, I quickly removed the battery from the phone, wiped it clean, and crushed it with my shoe before throwing the pieces into a metal trash can. If I got back to a normal life, I'd buy a lot of those cheap prepaid phones. My small team was going through them as fast as candy. Now let's look at Carlos Herrera's side of the story. I was feeling anxious and upset. This whole secret mission to control the Kenneth project was not going well, and I was under increasing pressure from the person in charge of it all. This wasn't the CIA director, it was my boss's boss, Jason Broadwell, who was in charge of national intelligence. There were actually 16 different intelligence groups in the US. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence was supposed to oversee all of them, but the NSA and some other agencies still reported to the Department of Defense, along with the Defense Intelligence Agency. These people, like Jimmy, Ginny, and Elaine, probably didn't even know who they really worked for. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security wasn't directly over the Director of National Intelligence, but worked closely with them on matters related to national safety. There are over 3,300 government and private agencies involved in U.S. security and intelligence today. As of 2010, there were 845,000 people with top-secret clearances. Honestly, I'm not sure anyone really knew the exact number. All this confusion and lack of clear responsibility allowed us, the determined ones, to get things done. What these rogue agents did might be seen as wrong, but maybe it wasn't completely illegal. They had some room to act on their own, especially with military officials from the Department of Defense who might back them up. How high did this go, and how much power did they have? It was a good thing that everything was being done quietly because what I was involved in was definitely against the law. I needed to keep myself safe, so I made sure I could deny everything if necessary. The best move I made was to use Bradley Gilbert, a clueless prep school kid and fraternity guy, as my scapegoat. He did what I said, but only by phone. I never wrote anything down, and I even used my own special agency phone for communication, a phone that the government was set up to ignore. There was no way for anyone to find any proof, either online or elsewhere. If things went south, it would just be his word against mine. Meanwhile, one of my best agents, Nathaniel Case, was keeping a close watch on everything Brad was doing while staying hidden. He was a bit slowed down at the moment because he had messed up a job involving a man named Jim Richardson. Nathaniel was the cab driver who got shot in the knee during that operation. I might have worried too much about it, but I was told to take care of Jim outside of our agency. It should have been an easy task, especially after delivering the terrible news about Kathy's kidnapping and her mother's death. That was another crime that was never approved. Maybe Nathaniel was losing his edge. Still, he managed to keep Jim distracted long enough to escape. If Jim had been really skilled, he would have taken Nathaniel out right away. Instead, Nathaniel took him to an empty warehouse that had been used by some Russian mobsters we had dealt with before. Nathaniel knew about our connections to the Russian group in Chicago since he worked closely with them. It was his idea to use them against Jim's wife to pressure him a bit more. I couldn't help but think that this was just a cruel personal attack and another bad choice. Brad was very upset after his meeting where he pressured Jim to find those rogue agents he had already mentioned to us. That's when he showed Jim a video that really distressed him. Brad believed I should go easy on Kathy for a while. He also wanted me to meet face-to-face with Jim and the rogue agents. He sounded almost desperate in asking me. Poor guy wasn't really made for this kind of high-pressure work. He would do much better in a regular office job. If everything went as planned, his family would be happy with his progress. And if he had to take the blame, his wealthy family could help him. Yes, I would like to meet these people personally. We used to have some serious talks before they were taken away from this country, sent to a hidden prison in a place that nobody wanted to be. They messed up and made the wrong people mad. Too bad for them. Life is tough, and then it ends. Anyway, I told Nat to calm down his team and make sure Jim's wife was okay and had everything she needed. You never know what works best in a tough situation. We could always stick to rules if needed. But now I was being much more careful about this. No one knew what had happened with Jim. I asked him about the mistake. I guess I didn't see what he was really capable of. He was acting, and he did it very well. He's a small guy, and I didn't think much when he jumped in the front seat of the cab. When he punched me, it felt like getting hit by a huge hammer. That little guy is strong and knows how to fight in many ways. Maybe I was underestimating Jim and his friends. If I met them away from our usual spot, I would be very cautious. I'd have my best security team ready for anything. If they all ended up gone in the next few days, that might send a strong message to other untrustworthy agents. That was definitely better than a husband seeking revenge, or even worse, me just doing my job and following orders. Adele had just come out of an important meeting. I had just finished a serious meeting about the current safety threats to Israel from Iran, especially regarding its nuclear plans. This meeting took place at a military base in the Galilee. Many members of Mossad, Ammon, and Shin Bet were there, along with my very high-ranking boss, who led the IDF Intelligence Corps. I worked for him in intelligence, though not many people knew that. Most of my allies thought I was with Mossad. Mossad gets a lot of attention, but that's fine with me. Some of my best friends are with Mossad. I was the main speaker at that meeting and talked about my latest efforts working undercover. It was quite a challenge because Iran doesn't allow Israelis in. I had a network of people helping me gather information in Iran. That was not too hard because the different groups in Iran were competing to seem more righteous. Many regular Iranians were getting fed up with it, especially those of Arab or Turkic heritage who were facing more and more disrespect. The strict local laws and the people who watched over morals on the streets were definitely a problem. Many people were secretly buying alcohol on the black market, showing how much they resisted the rules. Luckily, there were not many Russian agents around anymore. During and right after World War II, Iran was filled with Russians, especially from the KGB. Both British and Soviet forces were in Iran to protect and use its oil, but also to keep the southern supply routes open for their allies, including American supplies coming in through railroads and trucks. During that time, there were many trains and trucks, as well as millions of supplies sent to the Russians to help them in the war. They received thousands of aircraft, tanks, ships, and more. The ships mostly traveled through the northern routes in the Baltic Sea. The Russians especially liked the Air Cobra fighter plane, even though they had their own strong planes and tanks that competed well against the Germans. Stalin was clever, moving many factories to safety before the Germans attacked. This helped keep the supply of important weapons going as long as there were enough raw materials. The West, especially the USA, provided some of those raw materials and other items they specifically asked for. Perhaps the British and Americans let too many Soviet agents into Iran while working together against Germany, but looking back, it's easy to see things differently. Once the Soviets got a foothold, they wanted to stay. They sought equal access to Iranian oil and the rest of the Middle East, including Saudi and Kuwaiti oil. After the war, even after the Russians left Iran, there were still more KGB agents in Iran than in any other non-communist country. Iran became a tough battlefield during the Cold War until the 1953 coup that brought the Shah back to power. He used his security force to push out the Soviet agents and control the communist and religious groups that opposed his leadership, which was mostly mild compared to other leaders in the Arab world. A Swedish reporter once asked the Shah why he didn't rule like the King of Sweden. "I certainly would if Iranians were like Swedes," the Shah answered honestly. The reporter was not satisfied. The CIA's Operation Ajax, led by Kermit Roosevelt, who was the grandson of President Teddy Roosevelt, replaced the elected Prime Minister Mossadegh with the Shah. Mossadegh was a leader who did not trust the West. He leaned towards socialism and communism and welcomed help from the Soviet Union. This included many KGB agents who weren't afraid to use violence against those who opposed the Soviets, especially targeting the Shah and his supporters. These were tough times for British and American spies working in Iran, mainly battling Soviet intelligence. Most of my recent successes came from a tricky situation in Tehran with the Americans, especially with a spy named Jim Richardson, who was just as secretive as I was about who he really worked for. But I guessed he wasn't with the CIA. The CIA today was very different from the time of Kermit Roosevelt. Luckily, I managed to gain the trust of Colonel Jafar Mastani. It was quite the lucky break. He just came to me, especially after that striking woman, Jennifer, had a big confrontation with him. That memory always makes me smile. I hope I get to see Jennifer again sometime. Of course, I hope to see Jim, too, but he didn't have the same charm that Jennifer did. Iran was working hard on making its first nuclear bomb. There was no doubt about that. I had a valuable source, Dr. Missy, who was a nuclear physicist, and together with the colonel, we needed someone who could reach the highest leaders in Iran. We needed someone close to the supreme leader, the current Ayatollah. It was also possible that a contact in the president's office could provide the same insights. However, I worried about timing. The president often learned about important things only right before they happened, which wouldn't help us much. Figuring out their capabilities, like their technical skills, resources, and logistics, was important. But understanding their true intentions was even more crucial. The USA has a powerful nuclear arsenal and could potentially destroy most of the world. But the USA's intentions with its nuclear weapons weren't a concern. Other intentions from the government could be troubling. Israel certainly needed clear information about Iran's real goals, both in strategy and tactics. We believed Iran openly wanted to destroy Israel, set up a worldwide Islamic government, and take revenge on the USA. As long as these aims stayed within political and economic boundaries, we could manage. What we worried about was when politics turned to violence. If things didn't change, Iran would likely have a bomb within 10 months. Time was running out because of the efforts from Jim Richardson and his team against that Kenneth guy. The early bombs probably wouldn't pose much of a threat right away, but it was still a risk. I was sure that the Iranian scientists were still interested in getting Western technology to help them create smaller, better, and easier-to-use nuclear weapons. A massive bomb that weighed 5,000 pounds could be transported by truck or ship, or even delivered by cargo planes. But it was much trickier to send it via missile. A payload this size needed a very big missile, which was easier to intercept. Our anti-missile systems were getting better all the time, including Iron Dome and other advanced missile defenses with long-range capabilities. We often thought about how Iran might use these weapons, especially against Israel. There was also a worry that Iran could attack another country, like Saudi Arabia, and then try to pin the blame on Israel to stir up more conflict. These possibilities kept us up at night. John Keegan, a British military historian, wrote a thought-provoking book called Intelligence in War, showing that good intelligence can often have little impact in actual battles. A good example is the German invasion of Crete. British intelligence had cracked the German code, which meant they knew the Germans were planning to invade with paratroopers. The British commanders felt ready and confident as they understood the German strategy. Attacking an island without support from naval forces was a very risky move at that time. However, despite their knowledge, the British troops still lost, and the Germans took control of the island. Some of this was due to bad luck for the British during the battles, but it also showed the strength and determination of the elite German airborne troops. Their perseverance and a bit of luck led them to victory. This was the kind of thing that gave my superiors and me nightmares. I worried that I could do everything right, gather the information, and still see my side lose when it really mattered. After my meetings, the first thing I did was check for new messages. There were the usual updates, but nothing too exciting except for a puzzling email from Habib Ibrahim. This was Jim's alias in Tehran. It seemed like a warning, but I also sensed he might need my help. It was easy to convince my boss to let me take a short trip to the USA. We were all curious and a bit frustrated that our findings on Kenneth's efforts to supply important parts for nuclear weapon development to Iran had not been reported. This was a clear violation of international agreements, and the latest deal with Iran went unnoticed. Did anyone in Washington really care? If they did, why wasn't anything being done about it? Along with helping Jim personally, maybe he could answer some of these questions too. That's how I found myself in Washington, D.C., with my own small team of Israeli and Australian agents. We had to be careful, but it might be worth a little trouble in other countries if it meant I could work with Jennifer again. Jim, Jennifer, and I had dinner the night I arrived at my hotel. We were just business people discussing international matters in public. We were all a bit hidden, but just enough for safety. I was used to being disguised, whether I was in Israel or outside it. Poor Jennifer was very beautiful. No matter how she tried to hide herself, it was hard for her to blend in. I'm sure she could pretend to be someone on the street, but that wouldn't work in a nice hotel restaurant. They filled me in on some worrying details, especially about Kathy getting taken. I knew Kathy was Jim's wife, and I felt sorry for Jim with everything happening between them. But I was mostly focused on why all this was happening, along with the cover-up of what we had found out in Iran and Paris. Colonel Moss, Danny, and Dr. McGee kept confirming how hard they were working to make an effective device quickly. My own good news was that Jennifer spent the night with me in my hotel room. It was everything I had dreamed about. I had always thought Jennifer and Jim had a closer bond than just work, but Jim didn't seem upset about it at all. In fact, it made sense for our cover. It explained why we were together in public all the time. We could spend a lot of time planning and thinking through different situations. Jen was on the run, with many people looking for her. If she got caught with me, I would just be seen as a regular businessman from the UK who she was using for her own plans. I had all the UK documents to support that story. Maybe Jennifer was just being a real professional, but I could dream about something more, at least for a while, and that was enough for me. My team was the one who took Mrs. Gilbert and her 2 daughters. We treated them well. After her necessary kidnapping, she even had an emotional video call with her husband, Brad. Jennifer picked up the 2 girls, and they weren't scared at all. She told them she worked for their father, and they were brought right to their mother, who had gone from fear to anger at her husband. By that time, the worst that could happen to them was likely being sent away to a private Caribbean island. It promised a peaceful vacation far away from everything. No outside contact at all from that fancy resort. I thought we could convince her to handle it for 2 weeks. In just 5 days, our short but complete investigation of Bradley Gilbert gave us some good videos of him with his current partner. Poor Brad, if he made it through this, might wish he hadn't when his wife returned from her lovely holiday. We also managed to neutralize Gilbert's security team, who were not very good at their jobs, both alone and together. There were only 4 of them. Brad was really bad at his job right now. It was odd for such a serious situation. Clearly, someone else who was much better at their job but less visible was involved. We were keeping an eye out for that person as soon as we found out the name of the executive. Brad thought he was in charge. We started looking into Carlos Herrera using Mossad's resources and connections. I was pretty sure that Jim's loyal NSA friends were doing the same thing. We needed to find some personal weaknesses we could use against the next person up the chain of command. Jerk. We still needed to figure out the reason behind all this. Now let's focus on Nathaniel. Forget about the case for a moment. My knee and leg hurt every single moment of the day. I insisted that the emergency room doctors put a removable splint on it. Thankfully, there wasn't much damage, just a small hole. It was similar to a patella fracture, but it hurt a lot when it happened. All I needed was rest, to keep my leg up, ice it, and take pain medication. Instead, I had to watch that fool Jim Richardson while Brad and his not-so-smart security team followed him. I could only take over-the-counter pain relievers since I needed to keep my mind clear. Jim easily spotted his followers. He certainly knew the basics, like crossing the street or stepping off the curb. This helped him check for anyone following him. Brad's team might as well have worn bright signs, and I was struggling with my leg injury. I had to stay in my vehicles to watch and follow him. I never used the same car, truck, SUV, or van 2 times in a row. I barely caught on to when the guys came to deal with Brad's team. They were good. Jim came out of his last meeting with Brad just like normal, but no one tried to follow him that time. I stayed put and watched as Brad left, looking very nervous and worried. But no one else came out the front door. None of Brad's security team. They were either still inside or had been taken out the back. Darn it. I really hoped to see Jim come out, crying after what my Dagestani friends had done to his wife. He really deserved it. I kept thinking about tying him up while I spent time with his wife in front of him. Then I imagined hurting her and finally making him feel the same way. Maybe I would just injure him so he couldn't walk, leaving him to think about how he messed up. Should I tell Herrera about this right away? Maybe I should wait a bit to see if I could get what I wanted first. Just another day or so wouldn't hurt. The next day at noon, I met Herrera for our usual check-in. He said things seemed to be getting better. That video must have pushed Jim to act. He promised to bring in the other rogue agents, and Brad thought it would be a good idea for me to meet them. He also wanted me to help clean up that woman. She needed to be sent away soon with the others, but we could be nice until then. I wanted Brad to see her looking all right and not have his head messed up by things that are sometimes necessary in life. These were the kinds of people I had to deal with. Now, putting that aside, I was enjoying dinner with my date for the night, a lovely 20-year-old named Ellen. We had been together for 6 months. We were in my Alexandria penthouse, which I used for work, too. I was still married, but my wife and I slept in separate rooms and hadn't been close for years. Our kids were grown and living their own lives. I got a call on my special phone just after 8 p.m. It was not what I expected, and I felt annoyed. I can't reach my special contacts in Chicago. It's a secure line. Just tell me what you need. Your phone might be safe from the NSA, but mine isn't. She might be gone, maybe even dead. That would be for the best, but we need to find her if she's still alive. If Jim keeps talking, his career is about to go downhill fast. I stayed calm when he clearly could not. I'll handle it. If she's alive and using a phone or email, we will find her and I'll let you know. Get more people ready in Chicago. Get the right people this time. Understand? Okay, I'll make a call to get things moving. Then, I'll take my little blue pill and have some time with Ellen. I could find some relief that way, whether things worked out or not. Then, I'd send her on her way and return to my work. It might be a long, tough night instead of the nice one I hoped for. I feel surrounded by fools, just like many great figures in history. Sigh. Now, let's get started. Jim sighed. It was a gamble, but everyone arrived by 6:30 p.m. for this important meeting. Cowboy Rob, Jennifer, Elaine, and Adele listened as I shared what happened today. I talked about the voicemail from Kathy, my phone call with her, and my chat with Kenneth. All three calls seemed real and seemed to support each other, but I can't be completely sure. I still don't know where Kathy is right now, and I can't tell who is rescuing her and how close they are to Kenneth. Even in his weakened state, at least money-wise, he seems to be active again. I need to speak with him, but I dislike going in without full knowledge. Adele, can you have some of your people check on him starting tonight to see if they can learn anything? Adele just nodded. All right, Rob. Any luck with his electronic messages? I think I should meet with him tomorrow afternoon, Rob answered. I have someone carefully trying to set up monitoring for Kenneth already. Someone clearly doesn't want that to happen. I have to think that even Herrera doesn't have that much power with us, but the DNI likely does. Does Herrera have that influence over the DNI, Jason Broadwell? Or is Broadwell in charge of things? If so, why? Broadwell is appointed by the president, as is the Secretary of Homeland Security. The DNI just isn't at the cabinet level. How high does this all go? Elaine suggested we start looking into Broadwell Hill. We might as well keep an eye on the police, too. How far can we push this now that Kathy is free? Should we just make sure she gets away safely? And maybe we should all go into hiding ourselves. I'm not saying I recommend this, but I want to put it out there. Rob spoke again. Someone has already used deadly force and killed Kathy's mother and nearly harmed her father. I worry that Kathy, Jim, and everyone in this room could disappear if we surrender to the Gilbert Herrera group, which may not even be a group if it's all approved by the DNI, or even someone higher up. I'm afraid just walking away isn't really an option unless everyone is okay with living the rest of their lives on the run, probably outside the USA. I might consider that if I could be sure Kathy would be able to live her life normally, but I'll need some real and reliable information before I just give everything up. I really need to talk to this Herrera. Adele finally spoke up. What if we tried to throw off their reasons for doing what they're doing? Why don't we share everything we've found out about Kenneth and the ongoing developments in Iran's nuclear programs? Jennifer, we could send the information to WikiLeaks and post it on different platforms too. Maybe with all the details, real news sites would start looking into it more seriously. I think Adele has gathered some other information from Iran that we could include as well. Can we do that while still keeping your sources safe? It's tricky to use good information without putting our sources in a tough spot. It's best to avoid any suspicion about our sources, Adele added. We need emergency plans to keep our sources safe. That's the least we can do for them. With these thoughts in mind, Adele said, I think I can share a few more details. The international community and the UN nuclear agency especially might want to know about 2 other places where Iran enriches uranium that they haven't revealed. Rob, what about Kenneth? Will this affect his help in getting Kathy back safe? Jim said, Forget it. Let's do it and post it as fast as we can. Kenneth will have to deal with it. Maybe we should wait until Adele's team listens in on his room. Adele replied, We can do that quickly. He's at the Watergate Hotel. We just need to find his room number and a time when he's not there. I'll try to set up a meeting with him for tonight. You, Jin, and I will manage that and prepare the information for later broadcast once this meeting ends. I looked at Rob. Rob, is there anything else we need to discuss? Are we all in agreement to keep fighting back? Everyone looked serious but determined. It reminded me of a saying from my grandpa back in Tennessee. Holding a tiger by its tail. If you hang on, you might get hurt, and if you let go, you'll definitely get hurt. Bradley was easy to deal with, but Herrera was a wild card and could be tougher to handle. And who was behind Herrera? He could turn out to be much more dangerous. Adele and Jennifer teamed up to find Kenneth's room and arrange for him to meet me. Jennifer dressed nicely, looking very charming, and was able to convince the clerk to share Kenneth's room number. Adele called Kenneth from a phone in the lobby. "Mr. Turner, we have a mutual friend who wants to meet with you tonight about his wife. It's important." After a moment, Kenneth answered, Yes. Have him come up to room 717. That confirmed what Jennifer had found. "He would prefer to meet you somewhere else. Can you please come downstairs, leave the hotel, and start walking? That would be best for everyone. If everything looks good, he might join you for your walk. Help! Okay, it will take me 2 minutes to get downstairs." Kenneth might be a little worried. I was standing outside the hotel across the street with a clear view of the main doors. Either way, Kenneth. When I told him to wait a bit before meeting, one of Adele's friends named Herb was keeping an eye on me too. 2 others were ready to break into room 717. As soon as Adele made sure Kenneth had left the hotel, she checked it thoroughly to see what was happening. Kenneth came out of the elevator in less than 2 minutes. He looked at Adele, but didn't recognize the cameraman who filmed him and Jennifer in Paris. Adele used a cheap radio and only code words to update me. Kenneth was heading for the hotel exit, and she was giving the go-ahead for the surveillance. Jennifer had already left the hotel, changing into casual clothes in a van nearby. She wore a disguise that helped her hide any weapons she needed for her next task. More backup was on the way for Jim in his meeting with Kenneth. A suspicious man had been watching Kenneth in the hotel lobby and then left through the same door. Adele saw this and sent a warning over the radio. Herb and Jen waited a few more minutes before finally leaving the same way. The unknown man seemed to be trailing Kenneth, but not too closely. Kenneth didn't seem to notice him as he walked confidently. The van dropped Jen off a whole block ahead of Kenneth, but out of his sight. She walked slowly around the corner back toward him, mumbling to herself and taking sips from a bottle. Kenneth stepped aside to avoid her, looking a bit uncomfortable. Jen fit the look perfectly. The man following half a block behind did the same but hardly noticed her. As soon as she passed the bag, she moved quickly and used a stun gun on the man's neck. He fell to the ground, shaking as the van circled back. Someone jumped out to help Jen get the man's heavy body into the van. They quickly searched him, taking away his handgun and backup revolver, plus his wallet and badge. He was another agent, at least someone with an ICE badge and ID. Interesting. Maybe someone thought Kenneth was breaking the rules or laws. A Homeland Security officer. Should we keep him and ask questions? Jen decided to take his weapons, money, and badge and leave him on the street as if nothing had happened. Kenneth was far ahead and hadn't noticed a thing. I had hung back and watched the situation unfold. Now I hurried to catch up with Kenneth at the next traffic light and walked with him down the side street. "Hey, Kenneth, how's your shoulder? And those other issues?" I asked. "Yeah, right back at you," he replied. "I'm trying to move on from that. I already said sorry to your wife and she forgave me. You won't, though. Messing with my wife? No way. But I can work with you. Just tell me what's happening and why. Cross me and I'll make you disappear. You wouldn't even see it coming. You'd be gone before anyone could do anything about it." "Okay, I believe you. I was in a meeting after everything happened with Kathy and her parents. That's when I first heard about it. I even recorded the meeting, and here's the file. It included some senators, a congresswoman, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the President's National Security Advisor. You'd recognize their voices, and it's clear who said what. They promised me $50 million to help me, but that hasn't come through. Now they've stopped responding to me, so forget them. I can't say which one of them is behind Kathy's kidnapping, but I think one of them might be involved. Probably that guy from Homeland Security. Jeb Jameson just listened to the recording and gave me a tiny USB stick. Now, who is Kathy? I asked quietly. No one has her, but I'm pretty sure she's with some people I know. One of them is named Ali Roth, and he might have ties to some group from Chicago. But he's a good guy in his own way. Can you get a message to him or Kathy somehow? Even better, can you share some names of people who might know where she is? I really don't want to make Ali angry. I may need his help again soon, and it feels like I'm losing friends fast. Too bad. Just tell me anyway. Saying no isn't an option for you right now. So he finally gave me some names and 2 phone numbers, 1 home phone and 1 cell. Why are you doing this now? Helping Kathy and me, going against your high-profile friends? You won't see any money from us. I don't like being ignored, and I really dislike what they did to Kathy and her family. I thought those political folks knew what they were doing with the whole Enron mess, But now I'm not so sure. Maybe working against them will help create some new chances for me eventually. They'll be out of office soon anyway, and as long as they don't find out I'm helping you, I don't see the downside. I don't think you'll tell them. Not until Kathy is safe. Okay. I just want Kathy, her family, and my family to be safe. You have to keep helping me. You have connections I don't know about. Please ask around. I thought about telling him about the online operation coming up and mentioning that he was helping Iran get stronger in making nuclear weapons. But I felt I could keep my distance from that if I needed to. I just hoped all our listening devices were working in his room. I was waiting for some interesting talk to happen there. I'll do what I can, Kenneth finally said. Here are a couple of numbers you can use to reach me. You should buy some cheap prepaid phones before calling. Got it? Sure, I replied. I knew he enjoyed our secret games, and he smiled. And thanks for helping Kathy with her troubles. I appreciate it more than you know. If things go wrong, I might have to stop you. His smile faded as I turned to leave. Now it was just a waiting game for me. I wondered where Kathy was and if she felt safe. I really hoped she did. I prayed that she was all right and kept safe from any harm. Tomorrow, I would start looking into Allie Roth and some of the other names and numbers Kenneth had given me. As I walked away, a van pulled up beside me and stopped. After checking for anyone watching, I quickly got in. Jen, Adele, and most of his team were already inside. They dropped me off at Elaine's place, and the others headed back to their hotels. I guessed Jen was staying with Adele to work on the online project about Kenneth, and they might help each other out in some ways. I was happy for them. At least they both understood each other well and knew they were both players in this game. Unlike me and Kathy, from the start, I was always the one taking charge, and she wasn't. I missed my dear wife and wondered if we would ever be together again. I truly didn't know what I wanted, but I felt a deep regret. Kathy had gone through so much, and I felt responsible for a lot of that. I thought about Mrs. Rosenbaum, who liked me despite her husband disliking me. I had taken her daughter far away from her home, her family, and maybe even her beliefs. Every action has its consequences. Some we can see coming, and others we can't. Right now, I seem to be at odds with some powerful people who thought differently. Maybe they needed a reminder about responsibility and humility, like the great Emperor Theodosius I. That night, I fell into a troubled sleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Meanwhile, at about 2 a.m., Kathy lay awake, unable to get back to sleep. I had been really sleepy today after being rescued by Allie and his friends. I felt a bit sore from what had happened to me, so I finally got out of bed and went to the kitchen for something to drink and some pain relief. Ali's safe house was quite big. It had large bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms upstairs, and a nice entryway. There was a big living room on one side and a den on the other. The kitchen and dining area reminded me of an old farmhouse. There was also a small bathroom and a mudroom near the garage that led to the back of the house. I thought there might be a basement, but I wasn't sure. The stairs to the second floor started in the entryway. As I came down, I heard soft voices coming from the den. I made my way through the living room to the kitchen and looked for something to drink. I wanted some juice first, and maybe a bit of wine later. I was dressed for bedtime in oversized sweatpants. Allie promised to get me some better clothes tomorrow from the local store. He must have heard me because he came into the kitchen just as I opened the fridge. He was also in sweats, wearing running shoes and a shoulder holster with a gun. "Don't you sleep?" I asked him. "I will soon." "Just doing my shift," he replied. "Should I be worried?" "Please don't. It's just safe to be careful. We have extra security here, and I like to keep an eye on things. Tonight, my team needs to practice." He smiled at me. "You're having trouble sleeping?" "It's a lot of things. I'm a little sore, and there's a lot on my mind. But knowing you're here makes me feel safe. Got any pain relief or wine? That's my go-to for feeling better." I tried to smile back. I think I can help with that. Soon, I had 2 pills and a glass of nice wine to take back to bed. It was my way of thanking him. As I passed by Allie, I wanted to give him a quick kiss on the cheek, but it turned into a kiss on the lips instead. It felt like the first time we had kissed years ago. I quickly pulled away, surprised and blushing. Allie apologized for the unexpected kiss, and I was so stunned that I nearly ran back upstairs. I felt a bit shaky and upset. Why did that affect me so much? I was stressed and felt fragile right now, missing Jim, who was not here. I decided I should keep my distance from Allie and not think about that kiss. Sure, like not thinking about a big pink elephant once someone mentions it. I finally fell asleep, but a loud explosion woke me up around 4 a.m. Allie rushed into my room with his gun ready. "We're under attack," he said. "Put this on quickly." He handed me some dark overalls similar to what he was already wearing. I slipped them on over my sweats and he took my hand. "Come on," he urged. He peeked out the bedroom door and I could hear gunfire coming from downstairs. After a quick look, Allie pulled me into a small hall closet and shut the door behind us. "Now hug me and hold on," he said. I obeyed and he pulled a lever above us. Suddenly, the floor dropped like a roller coaster. My scream was muffled as I pressed against Allie. With a thud, we finally landed, at least 2 floors down, but it felt soft, like landing on a pillow. We weren't hurt, just shaken a little. The back of the closet opened into a tunnel. It looked like a secret escape route, and we quickly left what turned out not to be a safe hiding place. Maybe we should have listened to Jim's warning about finding a new spot after making calls from that phone I used to leave a message at Jim's work. As we crawled out of the tunnel, about 200 feet long, Allie pulled the hood of his overalls over his head and told me to do the same. "Is this protective gear?" I asked. "No," he replied. "It hides us from view and helps us stay quiet." I could still hear gunfire from the house we had just escaped. Then everything went silent. Allie returned, looking serious. He was sad and angry. We had moved to another house not directly across from the one being attacked, but a bit farther away around the block. We got into a dark blue Toyota Highlander with tinted windows that was parked in the garage. Allie opened the door slowly and drove away with the lights off. Now it was my turn to silently mourn with Allie for the loss of his friends. They weren't just co-workers. They were important to him. I felt fear, uncertainty, and sadness, knowing more lives were affected because of me. As I tried to hold back tears, Allie drove steadily back to Jim. The next morning, I woke up by 6 a.m. again, which felt like my new routine. I started the coffee and then made breakfast for myself. Elaine and Rob had spent the night again, and I heard water running in their bathroom. Rob and I left for work at the same time. Rob had several offices where he could work from. I went to busy public places to borrow someone's phone. I needed to check my messages and emails from my old phone. I found one email with some links but no other information. I clicked on the links using borrowed phones and found they led to little-known blogs that shared our complete story about the Kenneth and Iran situation. I kept moving around all day. It felt like a waiting game now. Later, I planned to call Brad and ask him about the meeting with Herrera. I also wanted to find out if Kathy was free yet. I would also ask him about his own wife and daughters. At about 1:30 p.m., I used one of my throwaway phones to call Adele for an update. "Hey, I saw your email and the links. They look good. Any response yet?" I asked. "It went up on WikiLeaks right after noon, and Twitter is paying attention. Our mutual friend has already gotten some interesting calls about it. We should meet in person to talk about what's going on with that audio recording he gave you." We met at a bar about an hour later. The most interesting call was from Jeb Jameson. He was really upset and blamed Kenneth for the information getting out. Kenneth denied it, of course. Then Jeb asked what Kenneth would say if the New York Times wanted to interview him. Kenneth acted smart and started to talk about a promised $50 million payment. "I'll deny everything if the $50 million comes quickly," he said. Jeb got angrier. He told Kenneth he would get the money, but it had to be cleaned up first. And if Kenneth knew what was good for him, he had to say the right things from now on. I think Jeb was too upset to not be deeply involved in this. It looked like Brad was reporting to Herrera. Herrera? Maybe directly to Jeb or through Broadwell and possibly a number of other important people helping them. We really needed some power over Herrera, or maybe we just needed to scare him a bit. "Let's be careful," Adele warned. "We need to know more before we act." I felt frustrated and worried about Kathy. I planned to push Brad today for that meeting with Herrera about his family. The girls were fine, but Mom was getting more upset with her husband. She was willing to help us, but could hardly hide her fear during even a video call. "We should send her to the Caribbean soon," I suggested. "Keep her nearby until I meet with Brad and hopefully Herrera next. Time just feels like it's dragging right now." It was nearly 3 p.m. when I decided to call Brad. The call went really well. Our meeting with Herrera was set for the next day at 10 a.m., but in a different place. It was another house. I got the address. Brad was begging for his wife and kids to be returned. I told him that after this meeting he needed to be ready to support me. Did he understand what I meant? Should I send him something to make it clear? Maybe just a video of my guys having fun with her tonight. That made Brad serious fast. He promised he would support me fully. He pleaded for me not to hurt his wife or daughters. I didn't hear from Kathy at all today, but I wasn't too worried. Brad didn't mention her, and Kenneth hadn't called on any of the backup phones I kept just for him. I figured she was just staying safe. I had no way to reach her except for 2 names Kenneth had given me. I planned to save those until I could go and get her myself. The next morning, Jennifer and I went to meet Brad and Herrera. I thought having just Jennifer with me would show I was serious. The meeting was at another brownstone condo in Georgetown. Adele and his team were there to keep us safe. We weren't planning any big operation against Herrera just yet. I wanted to shake things up a little with some tricks. I would use lies, quiet threats, vague promises, and more lies as needed. And I wasn't going to let Herrera keep Jen today. I told him I needed her for the meeting, especially to help bring in Elaine and that cowboy Rob. We were walking to the entrance of the condo when everything went wrong. Jennifer was hit by a sniper's bullet. I ran for cover, ducking and dodging, but I heard 2 quick gunshots coming from inside the condo. The sniper took a shot at me, but it only hit the ground near me, causing a little mess but not hurting me badly. I dove behind some trash cans, then crawled and scrambled behind a car, hiding behind a tire. I was furious and heartbroken. Jennifer was gone. She was my oldest and best friend at work. Those responsible would pay for this. I was ready to make them regret it, even if I had to go after the most powerful people. What I didn't know then was that the gunshots I heard inside were Brad shooting Herrera in the back of the head, and then Herrera's guard shooting Brad. Brad had kept his promise and stood by me as best he could, but I was confused. What was really happening? No more gunshots came from the sniper. Our old beat-up van turned the corner and the driver ducked down as the side door opened for me to jump inside. Out of sight of the shooter, Adele was inside. He looked very pale. He clearly knew that Jen was dead. Beautiful Jen. Oh no, Jeb Jameson had just received some shocking news. Carlos Herrera and Bradley Gilbert were both dead. This was unexpected and a bit worrying, but just a little for now, for Jeb anyway. Brad had shot Carlos and then was shot by Herrera's security right after one of the rogue agents was killed. Outside their meeting place was Bradley, another rogue agent. The CIA was going to be in chaos, but that wasn't really Jeb's problem. As the Secretary of Homeland Security, it could cause some trouble for others, though. Jason Broadwell, who was in charge of the CIA, was connected to the deaths of some rogue agents. Jeb thought all of them might be dead, but it turned out only one had been killed. Nathaniel Case had believed he could take down 4 people at once in less than 3 seconds. Nathaniel was a skilled shooter, using a semi-auto sniper rifle with a powerful scope from less than 200 yards away. His big mistake was killing the woman first. He had let his feelings take over. He wanted Jeb to be shocked by his beautiful partner's sudden death right before his eyes. But yet again, Nathaniel had misjudged Jim. Jim's quick reaction took him out of harm's way. He should have stood frozen in shock, but instead, he dove for cover. If he hadn't moved, he would have been shot and likely killed. The M21 was a sniper rifle known for its power and accuracy. It was deadly in the right hands, capable of hitting targets from far away. Nathaniel had a good spot for hiding and a quick escape. He was on the top floor of a nearly empty 4-story building 2 blocks away. Once Jim was behind that car, Nathaniel gave up his rifle. He had set it up well to see the front of the meeting place without being seen himself. Frustrated, but knowing he needed to leave, he hurried down the stairs and exited the building quickly. The situation had become serious. Jeb had his sights set on Jim, Elaine Smith, Cowboy Rob, and Kathy Richardson. His mission was clear: find them and take them out of the picture. It all began when news about the Kenneth Iran case started popping up in blogs. Then came WikiLeaks, followed by the Drudge Report, and eventually it made its way to Fox News. Soon enough, it would be all over the major news outlets. Kenneth might even have to vanish. That depended on how well he could convince everyone he was innocent. He needed to be very convincing. Jeb Jameson had spent almost his entire life working undercover, even longer than Jim Richardson. Jeb's father had once been friends with Malcolm Little, better known as Malcolm X. Jeb was born in 1960 and grew up in a way that mirrored some experiences of the police today. He and Barry had first met in college at Columbia. They shared similar views about challenging the social and political rules of their time. Jeb was a senior, while Barry was just a junior. Jeb often thought that Barry didn't take things seriously enough. However, Jeb tried to be friendly with everyone, especially those on the left. He agreed with much of their talk. Barry even had some articles published in the student newspaper, and they both dreamed of bringing significant change to the traditional United States. Jeb had followed a careful path in life, rising through the ranks of public service. He eventually became the first African-American chief of police in Baltimore. He was well connected politically, especially with people in the federal government. He aimed for a powerful position in Washington, D.C. The events of September 11, 2001, helped Jeb's ambitions. The creation of the Department of Homeland Security opened new doors for him in D.C. Now he fully intended to use his influence. Barry's actions, which often showed little respect for law and order, actually helped Jeb's goals. Barry's approach made it easier for Jeb to navigate the political landscape and achieve his aims. Jeb already had control over ICE and the Border Patrol, which were directly under Homeland Security. He really wanted the FBI, DEA, and ATF as well, but they were still tied to the Department of Justice. The Attorney General, a strong supporter of African American issues and a good friend of both Jeb and Barry, held that position. It turned out pretty well. Jeb was part of the meetings about a plan similar to Fast and Furious. Ike and the Border Patrol needed to know what to overlook or allow. By this time, Jeb had already placed key people who were loyal to him in important positions. This was to make sure that many good things happened. For Jeb, good things meant letting more extreme individuals enter the USA through the careless processing of legal immigrants and the lack of control at the southern border. Many trained and well-prepared groups of bad actors were already in the USA, spread out across the country. Jeb had his own special team of investigators who engaged in many questionable activities. He got very involved in what was happening, more than he intended. But he didn't really trust his top assistants, who were also loyal to him but had their own groups. At least some of them shared radical ideas. These were the ones more directly linked to other extremists entering the USA. Nathaniel Case was not one of these individuals. He worked directly for Jeb rather than the now-gone Carlos Herrera. Jeb had cut ties with his Dagestani connections in Chicago. Instead, Jeb chose his own American Muslim agent, Darwin Moore, to handle the situation and brought in a group of 6 men from Saudi Arabia. They were well armed with automatic rifles, some rocket launchers, and about 20 pounds of explosives. These weapons were part of the Fast and Furious program, modified and sold to these men, who had also paid a lot for help crossing the Arizona desert and moving around the USA. They were already settled in Gary, Indiana, waiting for the right moment to strike against their targets in the USA. Then they got orders from Darwin to kidnap a woman. He provided the address, a description, and pictures of a Jewish woman named Kathy Richardson, telling them to use whatever force was needed against any armed resistance. The address had been found through tracking a cell phone call linked to a flagged official number. Jason Broadwell, working with National Security, was closely managing that project, with the NSA reporting everything to Jeb as soon as they had the information. Broadwell was uncertain why Jeb was so interested in all this, but he knew Jeb had strong connections with the police. Broadwell hoped to gain something for himself by helping Jeb. It was just a normal give and take among high-ranking officials. He believed that not getting involved was like showing loyalty, trusting his bosses and their decisions. He chose to ignore the lessons of the past, thinking that just following orders wasn't an excuse. Jeb seemed to have more important political and personal ties. Broadwell thought power could help him climb the ranks one day, but the failure to find Kathy affected Jeb's choices. He decided to go after anyone who could block Iran from getting advanced nuclear weapons. If they ever found Kathy again, they would have a kill order for her too. Jeb wanted Iran to have nuclear weapons. He thought that if Iran managed to test their first one, Saudi Arabia would do whatever it took to become a nuclear power. He understood the Sunni Saudis were worried about the Shiite Iranians, but for Jeb, more Islamic countries with nuclear arms was better. Eventually, he imagined Israel could be destroyed by nuclear fire, along with millions of Palestinians. In his mind, they would be martyrs rewarded in heaven. He believed this would be the main thing that brought down Israel. Jeb also hoped to see some precise nuclear strikes in the USA, potentially in Washington, D.C., which he thought might help reshape things. With more Muslims in power, Jeb thought his own fate would be different. He didn't plan to be anywhere near D.C. when chaos struck. There was still a lot to achieve before Barry's time in power came to an end, and Jeb's own influence might follow unless someone like Hillary took charge. He considered that Barry might, though unknowingly, support Jeb's goals by continuing certain policies. Jeb thought there was a chance Barry would keep him in his job at DHS for a time. If not, Jeb had already built strong connections in key law enforcement and intelligence agencies. His influence now went beyond what the Constitution or his title allowed. Now it was time to check Jim's site. Everyone was shocked by the recent changes. I still don't fully understand how or why I reacted so quickly. My response felt instinctive somehow. It wasn't a skill picked up from years of fighting like many Special Forces veterans learned. It felt almost like I was outside my body, with something else pulling me away and slowing everything down around me. In some past fights, I had felt that same slow-motion effect, allowing me to move or react quicker than normal. But this time, I wasn't thinking about my own safety. It wasn't even morning for Jennifer yet. That would come soon, and it would still be tough. What worried me most was losing our chance to escape and feeling too scared to act. It was hard to fight the feeling of helplessness. It felt all too easy to believe that the whole U.S. intelligence system was after us and would find us soon. I kept trying to urge myself to stay strong. It was natural to think that our enemies were behind that sniper who had taken a shot at us, but they only seemed to know when and where we would meet Herrera. They had no signs of knowing where we were otherwise. So I decided to head back to Elaine's place later that night. Like usual, I hoped everything would be okay. Rob was also supposed to arrive. Adele and his crew dropped us off near downtown where we could catch the metro or a taxi. Elaine and I shared a quick hug before going our separate ways. Now that I was in public again, I took out my blue phone to check for any messages. I saw a voicemail from Kathy. I recognized her voice right away. It was short and to the point. She said they tried to get her again last night, but she managed to escape. "We're just running now," she said, sounding upset. I could feel her frustration. I could only think, what a mess. Next, I checked Kathy's side. We left the old safe house quietly. Once we got onto a main road, Allie turned on the headlights. About 45 minutes later, we arrived at a big gated house. Allie spoke into the intercom, and the heavy gates opened, allowing us to drive up the long path. It was almost 6 a.m. when we parked and walked into the mansion. An armed attendant welcomed us and led us to a cozy sitting room. Allie and I sat quietly while we waited. The attendant returned and took Allie aside. He smiled softly at me, patted my arm, and promised he would be back soon. When he returned, he was with an older, pleasantly plump man wearing a fancy robe. "Shalom," the man greeted me quietly. "Shalom," I replied. Allie introduced him. "Kathy, this is Moses Berger, a good friend. Mrs. Richardson, I knew your father a bit through work and others like Allie here. I only ever heard good things about him. I am so sorry for your loss, and for your sweet mother as well." "Thank you, Mr. Berger," I said. "I'm just Kathy, and I'm just a mom." Allie told me a bit about what's going on. "So, what's the plan?" Allie asked. "I think I should get Kathy back to D.C. and her husband right now. That attack last night was worrying for many reasons. I'm not sure how they found us so quickly. I can't help but think about betrayal. Maybe the NSA really is that good at listening in on us here in the USA. How can I help you? I just need to borrow some cash. Enough for a few days' drive to D.C. I want to stay low-key, no credit card use." "All right. Harry, bring me $10,000 and the keys to the Cadillac Escalade. You should travel in comfort," Mo said to his helper. Ali started to complain. "Mo, that's too much. If they find us with that SUV in your name, they'll be all over you." Mo just laughed. "The feds have been after me since day one, you know that. I've managed to handle them fine, just like my dad did. Well, now they seem to be looking more aggressively. Not just police or government lawyers, but armed criminals, too. My dad survived some dangerous mobsters as well as the feds. I think I can, too. Just take the money in the car and look after yourselves. Get this wonderful woman back to her husband. And you can call me or come to me if you need anything else. Congratulations." Allie and Mo talked back and forth a bit more before Allie accepted Mo's help with thanks. Maybe Allie didn't want to owe too much to someone like Mo. I asked him as we got in the car. Allie laughed. I'm pretty sure most of Mo's money comes from honest work now, but I think he still does a little bit of the old ways, just to feel like a mobster like his dad and granddad. We know each other too well, so we'll never be even, and that's okay. I still felt nervous until we hit the highway I-90 going east. The endless miles and lack of sleep soon had me almost asleep in the car. Ali finally woke me up. "Where are we?" I asked. "Just outside Toledo. It's only about 1 p.m., but I'm really tired too. I need a nap, and I think we should find a room somewhere. It would be safer, even if we only stay for a few hours." "How about that?" "Sure. But I feel okay right now. If we grab a bite to eat, I can keep driving. We're still about 7 to 8 hours away. What would we do when we get there? Can you reach Jim just by leaving him a voicemail?" I guess I could leave him a secret message. He'd get it, and probably no one else would. We probably had to get a room for the night anyway, and that's what we did. I picked up some fast food from Wendy's. I kept driving while Allie quickly fell asleep once we got back on the highway. I started to think about who I could call. Maybe Jennifer, Elaine, or even Dr. Ruth. I needed to get some burner phones. I just hoped Jim was okay. Now let's see what Jim was doing. Cowboy Rob made it to Elaine's that night. He already knew about Jennifer from his connections in the CIA. No one there seemed to know what happened. Maybe Pereira and the others had a story ready if something bad happened to us. But Gilbert killing Herrera changed everything. Now the FBI was definitely involved, and things might not be completely under their control. Maybe Jennifer's death could mean something. I thought bitterly about how I hoped things were finally turning in our favor, but now everything seemed worse than before. With Herrera dead, where did we go next? I asked. Rob looked serious. We go after every one of those people. He talked about a meeting where Kenneth recorded Senators Rayburn and Reed, Congresswoman Callie Yoshi, National Security Advisor Nancy, and definitely Jeb Jameson. We also need to question Kenneth some more. This will take time, and we need that time. First, Adele's people need to get Mrs. Gilbert and her daughters out of town right away using fake IDs. The FBI will be looking for them now to check into Brad, I said. Rob continued. I have some special operators coming to help. Remember Bill and Pete from Iraq? They and their team just got emergency leave and will be here in about 18 hours. They're not under orders, but they volunteered to come. It seemed like they all remembered Jennifer and took it as personally as we did. I wasn't sure what they could add to our plan. I was sure they did their jobs well, but it still felt more like we needed to solve a puzzle rather than go after everyone involved. Once we started going after people, where would we stop? We definitely needed to find the sniper who shot and whoever gave that sniper the orders. But I still wanted a careful approach. I always hoped we could get back to a somewhat normal life. That probably meant a plan to catch the bad guys rather than just attacking them. I just needed to think things through. We all needed more information. And to get that information, we first needed to stay alive. Each day, Elaine and I kept our plans quiet, and even Rob changed his routine. He wasn't stopping by every night anymore, that much was clear. We each used a burner phone just for texting. Our messages were simple, just codes for when and where to meet. We'd pick public places like bars, restaurants, or malls. The NSA couldn't track text messages like that. We only used plain words and numbers, nothing that would seem suspicious. We also shared one Google email account with a random name and password that we all knew. This way, we could write longer messages in drafts, but never actually send them. Google sometimes shares its information with the NSA, but finding our secret messages would be nearly impossible. We kept our names hidden, using fake ones, so there was no way for the tracking systems to catch us. We could look for new drafts from public library computers or my cheaper phone, even using newly bought Chromebooks at public Wi-Fi spots. Chromebooks were affordable and came with some built-in security features, making them harder to track. We learned this strategy from hearing about Paula Broadwell and General Petraeus. The FBI found their shared email account only after seizing one of their laptops. We felt a bit hopeful about our own plans. Rob was still keeping his identity safe. He was slowly getting back in touch with more people from his group. I knew I needed to catch up with Kenneth the next day and get more information. But first, I had to meet Adele to check on the latest news about Kenneth's activities. It was another tough night for me, trying to get some sleep. Little did I know, Kathy was in a modest motel room with another good friend in Germantown, Maryland, safely away from danger at that time. But how long would that safety last? 1 week later, I was on my way to see Kenneth at his hotel. He really wanted to meet, and it felt important for our plans. I had on my best disguise. I'd painted my goatee green, wore makeup, and dressed like someone much older than I really was. My walk was slowed by a small stone in my shoe, giving me a slight limp and making my usual graceful walk more awkward. I didn't like meeting Kenneth at his hotel, but it felt like it was worth the risk. I was mostly afraid of getting shot, so I took a taxi straight to the hotel and hurried inside. Once I was in the lobby, I quickly looked around but didn't see anything unusual as I went up to my room. In the elevator, I thought about the past week. Things seemed really bad, but now some hope was starting to shine through. I had noticed an unfinished email in our shared account. Mrs. J had contacted Dr. R and was back in town. She wanted to meet Mr. J. I quickly wrote my own reply, suggesting that Mrs. J go to her favorite mall tomorrow around noon to meet Mr. J. The next day, I got to Kathy's favorite mall just as it opened. First, I walked around outside, checking the different entrances to see if anything seemed strange. After about an hour, I went inside and bought a few items to carry, just to blend in while I browsed around. I spent most of my time in the food court. Eventually, I spotted Adele, who I was pretty sure was in disguise. This wasn't planned, but he must have seen the draft emails and decided to help me. I figured he probably had other people nearby for backup. Not long after, I noticed Kathy walking towards the food court with a strong-looking man. The man got a drink and sat at a table where he could watch Kathy. She did some window shopping, grabbed a drink, and then sat down with him. I didn't see anyone else watching them, so I moved closer. I was in disguise again, and Kathy looked at me when I got closer but didn't recognize me. At the last moment, instead of just passing by, I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Hi, Kathy," I said with a smile. Kathy looked surprised, and the man became tense, standing up slightly and not smiling until I spoke. Then Kathy really looked at me. "Jim?" she gasped, reaching for my hand. "Calm down, we're in public." "Who is your friend?" I asked, glancing at the man. "Sweetie, this is Allie. He's a friend of Kenneth and helped to find me. He did save me from some bad guys. They're all gone now. Allie lost some of his team too. Then someone else tried to get me, and Allie lost 3 more friends. We drove back here as fast as we could. I needed to find you." Kathy looked like she wanted to cry and be held. "Please stay calm," I said, looking at Allie. "Thanks for keeping her safe." Allie spoke for the first time. "Have I really saved her? Do you understand what's happening? Is it really over now?" "Let's leave," I said. "Kathy, are you all right? Can you walk?" "If you let me hold on to you, I can," she replied. I asked Allie, "Do you have a car nearby? Which way?" "Yes, follow me," he answered. We started walking toward one of the mall exits. After a minute, Allie quietly said, "We have some friends with us. It's okay. They are just looking out for us." "Is it really that bad?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. When we reached the Escalade, I held the door for Kathy to get in the back. I sat in the front with Allie. "Look, this is a very unsafe situation. That's why I'm wearing this disguise," Allie explained. Kathy asked, "Where are you staying? Can I please stay with you for tonight?" "Yes, we just need to find a place to stay. I am hiding, and I feel even more at risk with you here. I'm scared that something else could happen to you because of me," she said. Allie replied, "Okay, let's drive around a bit so I can make sure we aren't being followed. Then we can pick a random place and get a couple of rooms for tonight, all right?" Kathy looked a bit upset that I wasn't being more inviting, but I wanted to talk to her alone first about Jennifer and the dangers we faced. I didn't know Allie well and didn't want him to overhear our conversation. Eventually, Allie pulled into a Hampton Inn and went inside to get us 2 rooms. They weren't side by side, but he got us rooms 210 and 216. It felt a bit strange as Kathy and I went into 210 without Allie. Once inside, I turned to talk to Allie. "Give us a bit to get settled. I'll call you later so we can all go out to eat," I said. "Sure, thanks," he replied. I sensed he was protective of Kathy. He was doing a lot to keep her safe and make sure she was okay. It wouldn't surprise me if he wanted a real relationship with her. It was also possible that Kathy might feel some connection to him after everything she'd been through. She had gone from one scary situation to another, and Allie, being kind and strong, had an effect on her. When I entered the room, I saw Kathy sitting on one of the beds. She looked nervous and scared. I could still see some bruises on her face. I knelt down in front of her and took her hands. "I'm so sorry for everything that has happened to you, your father and your mother. I know this is my fault. If I hadn't treated you badly and kept you close to Kenneth, none of this would have happened. My pride and ego led to a terrible mistake. I could have taken you away, and we could have dealt with our problems together. Your mom would still be alive, and your dad wouldn't be hurt, and you wouldn't be in danger. I can't fix what's happened, but I will do everything I can to keep you safe now. I'm not sure how to handle everything right now. I just don't know." Kathy got down on her knees beside me and wrapped her arms around me. "Please, Jim, just hold me. I don't blame you, and I never will. We both have our flaws and have made mistakes, some pretty bad ones, but I still care about you and need you. After what I've been through, I know how cruel some people can be. What you do matters and should keep going. If everyone just runs away while someone else takes action, then evil wins when good people do nothing. We both tried, at least a little, to fight against what's wrong. I regret that my mom is gone, just like you do. But if we give up, how many other good women, including Jewish and other innocent women, might be hurt by people who hate? We all remember the Holocaust, and I know you do too. I wish I hadn't gotten caught up with Kenneth. That was a mistake. If we're playing the blame game, I take a lot more responsibility for my mom's death than you do. Kathy, everything else can wait. But there's more bad news. Jennifer was killed by a sniper yesterday. She was just standing next to me one moment and then gone the next. The sniper shot at me too, but missed. I'm like a poison, Kathy. I feel like no one should be around me right now." Kathy cried more and held me tighter. "Oh, you poor man. I know Jennifer was a dear friend to you. I felt jealous of her before, but I grew to like her, and I think she liked me too. I know she cared deeply for you. She was a good person who wanted to do good things and gave so much of herself. It's selfish, but I'm just relieved you weren't hurt. I know you feel guilty about that, but please don't. I knew Jennifer well enough to know she wouldn't want you feeling this way. She would want you to keep working hard to do good. Please don't push me away. I want to be with you, to help you if I can, even if it's just holding you each night. That's all I want." I shook my head. The elevator door opened, and my thoughts from the past week faded away. As I walked closer, I knocked on Kenneth's hotel room door and was let in. Now it was time to deal with Nathaniel's case. It was finally time to put Jim Richardson in his place. He really didn't stand a chance against me, especially not with my strong support team led by Jeb Jameson, who had connections in the Department of Homeland Security and throughout the U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies. I was surprised it took so long to find Jim. Leaving his fingerprints on my rifle, the one used to kill Jennifer, quickly put him on the FBI's most wanted list. Police across the country were looking for him, but he still managed to stay hidden. He must have found a place to lie low until Kenneth brought him out for this meeting. Leaving those prints was a clever move on my part, if I say so myself. His prints were all over that cab where we first met. Switching prints is simple enough. Even if Jim had been killed by the same rifle, detectives could easily think that he was part of the assassination plan. They might think he got shot by mistake during the chaos or was betrayed somehow. My goal was to make it look like Jim had gone crazy. This way, they would limit their investigation. Jim shouldn't realize that Kenneth was under Jameson's control. That was unfortunate for both of them. After I took care of Jim, I planned to shoot Kenneth twice in the chest, making it look like they had fought and killed each other. Then Jameson would drop the hunt for Jim's associates for a while. I also had proof to plant in Kenneth's room, showing that the whole story about acquiring nuclear bomb technology was just a lie that Kenneth and Jim believed would help them make money. This, alongside the recent terrorist attack in Chicago, would push Kenneth's case out of the news and onto the back pages. I was in the lobby, carefully watching for Jim. I almost didn't recognize him. He was disguised well. That must have helped him avoid the police the last week. I was also dressed in a way that helped me stay unnoticed, only glancing around while looking for Jim. People often seem to sense when they are being watched. though it's not scientifically proven. Maybe it has to do with the way the world works at a tiny level, where simply looking can change things around us. Because of this, the trick to staying invisible is not to stare at anyone else, and I was skilled at that. I gave Jim 10 minutes, then headed to Kenneth's room. I already had a copy of the keycard for that room and would walk in with my silenced pistol, ready to go. Most .380 ammo weighs about 90 grains, but I had some that weighed less and was quiet. Power could work as a simple tool for getting rid of someone. I needed to stay quiet for my escape. I knew Jim was quick, very quick, but he couldn't beat me. I wouldn't let him have a chance. I would just walk in, shoot him in the chest, then in the head. After that, I might have some fun with Kenneth before finishing him off. Then, even if it went against Jameson's orders, I might go after Jim's widow, Kathy, on my own. I found out she was in Paducah and seemed to have some protection there, but I thought I could snatch her away later for some real excitement. Maybe by then my own injuries wouldn't hurt so much, and my leg would be stronger. That little jerk had messed up my knee, but I knew I'd get my revenge. I stepped out of the elevator on the 7th floor. A couple got on, but there was no one else around. As I got closer to the room, I pulled out my gun and got it ready. I pressed my keycard against the lock and it turned green. I opened the door, but something blocked me. What was going on? I had a plan for this, but I didn't see it coming. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something shiny rolling toward me. It was a silver ball. A flashbang. I quickly ducked and covered my face, waiting for the explosion. The light was bright even with my eyes closed, but the sound wasn't as loud as I thought it would be. Before I could react, I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hotel room with 2 big guys in military gear, and there was Jim smiling at me. My hands were tied behind my back, and it was clear they had searched me. Jim held my quiet PPK in his hand and tapped my knee, asking, "How's the knee?" I winced because it still hurt. "I'll make you a deal. Tell me everything. And I mean everything right now. And I won't kill you. This is the best offer you're going to get. Let's start with who killed Jennifer." I replied, "Even if it was you, I said I wouldn't kill you and I won't. That's part of this one-time deal." I wasn't ready for this, but I had tricked Jim before and I could do it again. I don't know who actually pulled the trigger, but I know who ordered it. It's the person I really work for, Keith DeLuca from the CIA. Yes, the deputy director of the CIA, so Herrero was just following DeLuca's orders. Why does he have this whole grudge against me and my wife? I'm not totally sure, but I think it was because your information about Kenneth in Iran didn't match what the CIA found. DeLuca really put himself at risk by supporting this whole Iranian deal. And your wife was part of your investigation, right? So why is Jeb Jameson the one talking to Kenneth and pushing him to meet with me? I was surprised at how much Jim already knew. I had to be careful. DeLuca was using Jameson to do things while keeping himself out of sight. It was just like how he used Herrera, who then used Gilbert. And Keith knew that Jameson and Kenneth had some sort of connection. How did you get Gilbert to shoot Herrera, by the way? I was just trying to take back some control and play into his pride. But Jim didn't answer my question. I knew I had some digging to do on all this. What's your name? Not Casey. When I heard Casey, I couldn't help but lie a little. It was the name I used. People say it like Casey, and it's just a more common way to spell it. Jim replied, "I guess I'll just have to think about it." "You definitely will," he said, then signaled to one of his tougher guys who gave me something, and I quickly passed out. When I woke up, I heard someone calling my name from far away. I felt groggy, maybe from the drug. "Yes, I hear you," I finally said. "Open your eyes, wake up," the voice urged. I opened my eyes and noticed I was in a sort of small, enclosed space, similar to an MRI machine. At least my hands were not tied anymore. I don't usually mind tight spaces, but this felt uncomfortable. "What is this? Let me out of here!" I shouted. "Looks like you're awake," Jim said. "Do you recognize my voice?" "Yes, let me out and we can talk." "Oh, we will talk for sure, but I guess you've never done much scuba diving, especially at the pro level. If you had, you'd know exactly where you are right now. Ever heard of the bends?" I knew a bit about scuba diving and had heard of it. "You're in a recompression chamber, and you've been here for the last 4 hours at a pressure of 6 bars with normal air. You are really filled with dissolved gases. If we rush you back to normal pressure, you would likely die quickly and painfully from decompression sickness. Do you get it?" Yes, what do you want? I asked. This is your last chance. Start telling the truth or you will die today, and I'll make it last as long as I can. Your choice. Want to feel what the bends is like? I started to feel a bit scared. I tried one more approach. You won't do this, Jim. You are a devoted Catholic, and this goes against everything you believe in. Really? Have you ever heard of Torquemada? Jim asked. I thought I heard him speaking to someone else. A new voice, one I didn't recognize, then spoke to me clearly. Jennifer was my partner, and I'm Jewish. Jim and I work together. Tell him the truth. I felt a change in my ears, like when you're on a plane, and I started swallowing to help ease the pressure. Soon, I began to feel a lot of discomfort all over my body. I couldn't hold back my groans. Who's really in charge now? Just tell me a name and this pain can stop quickly. It hurts so much I can't think of another lie. I finally gasped. It's Jameson. Jeb Jameson, please. The pressure around me grew and I noticed a shift. We're giving you pure oxygen right now and raising the pressure again. The pain should let up in a few minutes. Then you'll tell us everything you know. This is your last chance to stay alive. Use it wisely. I did. I confessed to killing Jennifer, being involved with the Dagestani, and planning an attack on Kathy. I shared everything I knew or guessed about Jameson, including his suspicious ties to certain groups and helping some enter the USA legally and illegally. I also revealed my plan to take out Kenneth and Jim in the hotel room. I didn't know Jameson's real motives, but for me it was just about doing my job. Things turned personal when Jim shot me and got worse when Kathy was kidnapped and her mother was killed. I won't kill you, and I promise I won't. But soon, you might wish I had, I said. I then heard that other voice again. The man claiming to be Jennifer's partner said, I want you to remember my voice as the last thing you hear while you still can. I'm in charge now, he added, talking to someone else, saying something like, just be careful, but don't kill him. The pressure began to shift again, and the pain grew. I wanted to lose consciousness, but I held on. My mind started to drift away from the agony and other thoughts. A little after 5 a.m., 3 days later, a man was dumped out of a rundown van onto a rough street in Baltimore. He was still alive, twitching and mumbling nonsense. But there was no spark of life left in his eyes. Even if the doctors knew what was wrong with him right away, the damage had already been done. It wasn't just his skin and joints that were hurt. His brain and nerves were also affected by severe decompression sickness. The harm was too great to fix. He would end up spending 10 years in a mental institution, suffering in a way that even strong pain medicine couldn't ease. For a short time, some of his caregivers considered increasing his pain medicine to a level that could harm him, because his cries and whimpers seemed never-ending. He never got his mind back. A brief look into who he was and how he ended up this way didn't give any answers, and no one at the facility found out anything about it. Now, I needed to check on Jim. I left Nat to face Adele, Bill, and Pete, who were in charge of the special chamber he was in. Pete had a good friend who lost part of his leg while serving in the military, yet he still worked as a commercial diver using a special leg and foot attachment. As I walked away, I thought about the past week. I wasn't proud of what I had done to Nat. My conscience bothered me a little. I had basically deceived Nat because what we were doing to him could lead to harm sooner or later. I said a quick prayer for both Nat and myself. I hoped that maybe Jesus' mercy would help us both when the time came. I remembered the night I spent with Kathy in a motel last week. We had our basic needs met that day: food, shelter, and even some sleep. But I still worried about safety, especially Kathy's well-being, love, and belonging. I didn't care much about self-esteem until we were both safe. During my marriage to Kathy, I felt that I could take care of myself and my needs. I had food, love, and support from my wonderful wife, but then Kathy broke many of those feelings with her actions. Now my sense of safety was at risk because of the dangers we faced together. Kathy seemed determined to help me heal the parts of my life that she had hurt, but it wasn't easy. That night we all went out for dinner, Kathy, Allie, and me. The atmosphere felt strained with heavy silence among us. Kathy held on to me tightly, but I noticed she also wanted to be close to Allie. I found myself asking what I really wanted now. Would I be happier if Kathy and I separated and never saw each other again? At least then she couldn't hurt me anymore. These were questions about my basic needs, food, and safety. Learning about Kathy's betrayal hit me hard, almost like a physical injury. It felt as though I was under attack, suffering pain from the person I trusted most. Dealing with these feelings was tough, and it was hard to ignore the hurt. Much harder than dealing with tougher problems. I realized that Kathy was going through something similar now. I had pushed back against her, but I still felt stuck at the most basic levels of need. Despite this, she genuinely seemed to want us to be together again. I found it hard to believe, given how I felt. Was she much stronger emotionally than I was? Why was she acting this way? We were both very smart. Things were definitely more complicated because we had dangerous enemies after us. Above all, I didn't want anything bad to happen to Kathy, especially not her getting hurt or even worse, killed. When we got back to the motel and were alone, I tried to address some awkward things between us, most of them. Kathy, I saw the video of what happened to you. I know about it. It was done to get to me, to make me more cooperative. I'm really sorry. I feel like it's my fault. You didn't deserve any of this. I hope you're okay and can move on from it. Maybe Dr. Ruth can help you with it later. Kathy lowered her head, and a few tears fell. I gently lifted her chin and said, "Look at me. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You couldn't have changed anything. I'm just so glad that Allie and his team found you and got you out. I wish I could have helped. I felt like I had hurt her even more. I never wanted to hurt her, not even back then with Kenneth, and not now." She insisted, "You didn't hurt me. Not this time. Please don't think that about yourself. Just don't. But can you tell me what happened in as much detail as you remember? Skip the parts about being beaten, okay?" She smiled a little. "An after-action report? Yes, my charming Mr. Spy Boss." She spent the next hour recounting what happened. She couldn't remember any names for possible follow-ups, but with how much information Ali's men were gathering, I wondered if they had uncovered something important. So who were the other attackers? More from Dagestan or another group? I needed to talk with Ali in the morning. As bedtime came, I felt uneasy but knew it was time. We both took showers and I put on my underwear. The TV was on for soft lighting and a bit of background noise, with the volume very low. Kathy stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, then quickly climbed into bed under the sheets, letting the towel drop. I caught a glimpse of her bruised body. "Please hold me," she said softly. And I did. It felt so comforting to have her warm body next to mine. It fulfilled many deep needs that we all have. Just before she fell asleep, she whispered, "I love you." I felt a thrill that reminded me I still had a strong connection to my wife. But I was also scared and still hurting. I worried about the pain she might bring in the future. The next morning, I woke up feeling her warm body against mine. As we got dressed, she asked, "You're going to send me away again, aren't you?" I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was balancing on a very thin edge, and it was dangerous, especially because threats were real now. I needed space from her. It was hard to keep worrying about her safety. So where could I feel safe? Who could protect me if she couldn't? Ali had been helpful so far, right? Maybe he could keep helping. He cares about her and dislikes her enemies. He stands against what they represent. He cares because he is Jewish, but also because he is American and a man. She is a wonderful, good American woman who is also Jewish. It all connects. We needed to talk about this and other important things. Kathy, please work with me on this. I'm worried we all are putting our feelings aside. What we want is different from what we truly need right now. After breakfast, Allie, Kathy, and I went to our room to discuss things seriously. Allie, have your people found anything about Danny's enemies? Do you know who attacked you? I had been using some burner phones to stay in touch back home, being extra careful. Most of my team was either dead or in the hospital, but I had a strong contact with more connections to help us. Kathy, you know him, Moses. He had found one name that seemed important. Darwin Moore, a DHS investigator. Moses was trying to track him down for an interview. He had friends in the Chicago Police Intelligence Division who owed him favors and were helping out. They might be able to identify this guy. Allie, can you ask Kenneth to come here this afternoon? We all need to talk. Just don't mention that Kathy and I are here, I said. Allie managed to arrange that, and Kenneth showed up around 2 p.m. Kathy and I walked in right after he entered Allie's room. "Hello, Jim." "Hello, Mrs. Richardson," he said. Kathy ignored him. "Did you hear about Jennifer?" I asked. "Jennifer? No, I haven't heard anything," he replied. "She was killed yesterday," I said. "A sniper shot her while she was next to me. The sniper missed me." "Killed? I'm so sorry, Jim. I truly didn't know. I want to assure you I had nothing to do with that. If I thought you were involved, you wouldn't be here now. But I do have one question that's been on my mind. Why are you still alive, Kenneth? You don't have all that money keeping you safe anymore. So I think something else is at play. Maybe you have some strong allies or you're just covered in another way. Please tell me what it is. It's quite simple. I don't know all the secrets, but I know enough about key people. I've taken steps to ensure they are aware of the information I have. Things are serious now. You need to really push everyone in that meeting you mentioned. I need to find out who gave the order for that hit, and I need to know fast. Just so you're aware, you don't have anything on me that matters. If I'm taken out, or if Kathy or anyone else gets hurt, you won't last long. Don't even think about disappearing. That's not going to happen. Trust me. So get to work. Now let's check on Kenneth. It's time to put some pressure on Chucky. Senator Charles Rayburn. I tried calling his office but couldn't get through, so I left a message. It was short and to the point. Is your life insurance paid? Is your insurance up to date? Have you traveled to Southeast Asia recently? As I told Jim, I was still alive, if barely, because I had enough information about what's going on. The senator called me back within the hour. What kind of message are you sending, Kenneth? A serious one, Chucky. Oh, come on. Who killed JFK? I asked. Stop avoiding the question and just talk. Not on the phone. We can't do it in your office either. Let's meet tonight somewhere else. Okay. Come to my house at 8 p.m. I'll be there. And I have backup plans. Don't even think about crossing me, Senator. Got it now, Kenneth? Don't get all paranoid. He tried to laugh, but it didn't sound genuine. What I had on Rayburn was real proof. He had a troubling interest in young girls, and I knew he sometimes acted on it. I had flown him to certain places for this before, Thailand and other spots in Southeast Asia. Locations like South Korea, Japan, and even Vietnam, where it was easy to find some time for fun. If that information got out, he might not go to jail here, but his political career would be over, and he knew it. He liked being a senator and all the benefits that came with it. Maybe he even had plans for a higher position within the next 8 years. I arrived on time and was guided to his private study, where I waited 10 minutes for him to show up. "All right, what's so important?" Rayburn said, sounding annoyed. "Hello, Chucky. Is your life insurance all paid up? Because mine sure is now. I'm not feeling very sure of myself. I might not be around for much longer. When I was rich, I took care of my own insurance, but that's not the case anymore. I have coverage with more than just MetLife. I have some friends who are on the edge of things and can access certain safety deposit boxes. These boxes hold different papers and videos of you doing things that you might not want anyone to see. If I were to suddenly die or just vanish, it could be a big problem for you, Reed and Carly. This isn't just gossip. It could be major news in big papers like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. This could be very bad for your career. If your public service job ends, how can you be sure your life won't be in danger too? What are you talking about? Who killed JFK? Do you have any idea? Just think about it. All I know is that the Warren Commission was a joke. The results were decided long before that group met. But no, I don't know who really killed JFK. Maybe Oswald did it, but he wasn't acting alone. My father always told me to keep quiet about it and not dig too deeply. He reminded me that if JFK could be killed without anyone paying for it, then anyone could be in danger. Right now, I don't feel safe, and you shouldn't either as a sitting senator or even after you retire. There are people looking for you. Maybe not powerful people, but dangerous ones, similar to who shot JFK. Who's chasing me? Why? Just listen. JFK was murdered by a large group working together. It wasn't just one person. There were many parts and a lot going on. It involved Cubans, the CIA, and the Chicago mob. But the real power behind these events was all from Texas, including LBJ himself. JFK had issues. He came from a troubled family, and he wasn't loyal. He needed help to become president, and he needed help even for the nomination. The mob and the Teamsters helped him win West Virginia in the primaries. Then, during the general election, he needed help again. The mob helped him win Illinois, and it was close, just an 8,000 vote difference for the entire state. That's where LBJ came in to deliver Texas. He bragged about that close win, saying, "What do you want to win by? 100,000 votes? 200,000? Just name it, and I'll get it for you." And he did. The mobsters wanted their guy in the White House. They expected a little respect and payback in return. LBJ thought he'd get his chance at the presidency in a few years, but JFK kept making mistakes, like with the Bay of Pigs operation, and it became a mess. Many men were left behind during the mission, but they were not important. This situation was much worse than the Benghazi incident. There were CIA field agents, former U.S. military, and many Cuban fighters who were ready to oppose Castro until the end. They all felt betrayed by one person, JFK. This betrayal led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, a time when the world came close to nuclear war during the Cold War. The Kennedy family claimed it was wise presidential leadership, but it seemed like just another mistake. JFK had a history of bad luck, like getting his boat hit by a Japanese destroyer in World War II, and his brother Joe Jr. lost his bomber in a non-combat mission. Was it just bad luck, or the result of poor decisions? JFK and his brother RFK worked hard against organized crime across the country. They tried to stop rumors or blackmail that hinted their father, Joe Kennedy Sr., had made secret deals with organized crime to help get JFK elected. For the Kennedys, it was just clever politics, but it didn't turn out well in the end. JFK planned to replace Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, with Bobby as vice president in the 1964 election. LBJ did not like this plan at all. If Bobby became vice president, it could end LBJ's political career and power. So, LBJ and his Texas associates met to discuss options. They agreed that if LBJ became president, he would remember his friends and not betray them. That was an important part of LBJ's plan. Also, LBJ would owe a lot to certain supporters if he became president. This situation led to a messy Vietnam War that required a lot of military spending. It seems strange how poorly things went in Vietnam. Who could have messed things up so badly unless they had other goals? The people behind the JFK assassination worked very carefully. They used a secretive approach that most people were unaware of. Former CIA agents found a group of angry Cuban snipers. They worked with current CIA agents, connected with the Secret Service, and learned the route for the car in Dallas on that day. LBJ's team ensured the route stayed the same. Lee Harvey Oswald became the perfect scapegoat. He worked along the route where the car would pass and was chosen for this reason. Although his gun was involved, he didn't actually fire it during the assassination. He wasn't even in the same place as the real team of snipers, and the mob took care of Oswald later through their own guy, Jack Ruby. Ruby had always dreamed of becoming a full member of the mob, but it was too late for him. He had cancer that couldn't be treated, but his family would be well cared for after he was gone. While in prison, he kept quiet and didn't talk to anyone. If you watch old films of LBJ, he looks really scared for the first week after it all happened. He was frightened because when a king is killed, the next king feels his life is at stake. He eventually calmed down and played his part. What helped was the clever way the real plan was hidden amid many made-up stories that spread quickly. That's how you hide a real plan and get away with it. LBJ choosing Earl Warren to lead the team investigating the assassination was just more typical politics. Warren needed LBJ's full support for civil rights for minorities, along with a big move towards more government control, which led to LBJ's Great Society. Many people involved ended up passing away early, which just added to the wild stories. People started believing in silly conspiracy theories while the real plan stayed safe. The point is that anyone can be harmed, and some very skilled U.S. intelligence workers are now the target of powerful individuals. They know it and are now hiding out, but are still fighting back. And your life could be at risk too. Could this be linked to that Iran deal? I can hardly believe it. My support for that was just a little political favor. We managed to get a budget passed that still has a huge amount of spending in it. You know how tough it is to work with those progressive thinkers. Plus, Barry's pride makes things harder. Who really wants to harm anyone over that? You're the one who lost your $1 billion. Seems like you'd be the most affected. Yeah, but it's not just me. I think it has to be Jameson or Nance. They were the only two non-elected people at our meeting at your farm, remember? And I don't have any dirt on them. Not like you three. They wouldn't care if my own insurance details were leaked. Here's where your problem meets mine. We need to start working on getting rid of those two. This might mean thinking about impeachment, or at least making it seem like a real threat. You'd better get on it before it's too late. That's all I can say for now. Honestly, I don't even care about that promised $50 million anymore. I just want to live a little longer. Fine. I'll start a new Senate investigation into this whole Iran nuclear deal, and I'll start stirring things up. I'm going to keep the pressure on and slowly increase it. If they start talking too much, I'll try to find out who has been doing what in a more private way. I'm not completely sure, but I think it's more likely Jameson than Nance. Nance always looks out for her own interests first. Jameson, on the other hand, seems a bit unpredictable and may have different goals. Are these other agents really as dangerous as you think? They're the ones who took me down, and I didn't stand a chance against them. If I were you, I would be careful. Ask the FBI about what happened to Jennifer Smith and those two CIA executives. They were killed on the same day and at the same place, Herrera and Gilbert. Have you heard anything about that? No, not yet. I'll do my best to help. You're in touch with these people, so try to keep them in check. I need some time. I'm trying, but the clock is ticking and it will run out soon. If another assassination happens with these rogue agents, it could end not only my life, but also your career. I really believe they are just as determined as the people behind the Kennedy assassination. Don't take this lightly. The next day in Chicago, Moses Berger went to Woodfield Mall to buy a gift for his niece's 12th birthday coming up next Saturday. He usually has others do his shopping, but he felt like going himself this time. Harry and Jeff, who were with him, had military backgrounds and knew how to handle certain tools, especially the special radios for private communication. Woodfield Mall is one of the 10 largest malls in the U.S., located in Schaumburg near O'Hare Airport and not far from Moe's home in Long Grove. There were many shoppers, including busy moms and their kids, in the multi-level mall full of over 300 shops. Among the crowd, one man sneaked into the mall 45 minutes before his friends arrived and casually browsed the stores. He made his way closer to the mall security center. When he got there, he shot the 3 security staff inside. None of them were armed. They were just making $11 an hour to keep watch. The man shut off all the automatic alarms that would notify the police or fire department and then sent a signal using his small radio. The plan was straightforward. Harm as many people as he could and then escape or even sacrifice himself if it meant taking many others with him. There were 3 teams, each made up of 2 men. One was the main shooter and the other provided support. One team began at one end of the mall on the ground level. Another team started at the far end, while the third team, which included the security room member, waited on the upper level in the middle. The wolf teams had a plan to gather the shoppers into a tight group below them. Then they would drop homemade grenades on the crowd to cause harm, while the 6 terrors would change their clothes and blend into the frightened crowd that was allowed to escape. With only 6 people, it was hard to control everyone, but they hoped to hurt many people, aiming for hundreds or maybe even close to 1,000. Each team carried a big briefcase with a powerful phone jammer inside. This was meant to delay the arrival of police and emergency responders. The plan seemed simple, but the main goal was to take out the security room first. After that, they thought everything would go smoothly with just minor issues that could be easily fixed. However, Chicago was not like a European city. The terrorists were told that the people there were not armed due to strict gun laws, but many shoppers were carrying weapons, more than the terrorists expected. This included off-duty police officers and those who had private security teams. Many moms who once served in the military also carried guns for their safety and their children's protection, so things didn't go as planned. The first wolf team entered the mall and began locking the doors after starting the jammer. One member took out his fully automatic rifle and started shooting at anyone in sight. People screamed and ran for safety. The shooter hit a few people, and the bullets caused chaos. He felt powerful, thinking he was causing destruction, but that feeling quickly faded. Suddenly, he was struck by several bullets hitting him in the chest. His vest protected him, but then one bullet hit his left eye and he fell. Just maybe, his partner looked shocked too as he tried to pull his AR-15 out of the duffel bag. He was glancing around frantically for the shooter when a large, angry man dressed in flashy jewelry approached him. Without warning, the man shot him right in the forehead with an illegal Glock, while also shooting at women and children nearby. It was disturbing. The partner saw a hole where he used to be. The shooter then blasted the lock off a chain door, and he and his group walked away and drove off. "You can't even go to the mall in peace anymore," he muttered to himself. Another team of Wolf members managed to go a little further, taking down more people, but soon 5 shooters opened fire from hidden spots and took them both out. It turned out to be 2 off-duty police officers and 3 moms who played soccer. The officers received praise for their bravery, while the moms had their weapons taken and received hefty fines for carrying guns illegally. However, in a strange turn of events, new guns and enough money to pay the fines magically appeared for those 3 women. From that day on, their kids showed much more respect for their mothers. Mo and Harry were just leaving a store, of all places, Victoria's Secret. Mo decided to shop for something special, not for his niece this time. Meanwhile, Harry noticed a Middle Eastern-looking man casually walk out of an employee door. He met another man who looked like his sibling near the railing that overlooked the mall's open area. They had a duffel bag, and Harry thought he saw a bulge under one man's shirt that suggested he was hiding something. Suddenly, they heard the loud sound of gunfire. Harry quickly pulled Mo back into Victoria's Secret and called Jeff on his personal comms radio. "There's gunfire in here. Is there anything happening outside?" "Nope. I'm monitoring the police scanner and it's quiet there too," Jeff replied. "We're upstairs, close to Victoria's Secret. We might need some stronger backup. Be careful." "On my way," Jeff thought as he grabbed his favorite old weapon from the trunk. He had to sneak it into the mall without alarming anyone. In a situation like this, people might mistake him for a bad guy because of the gunfire around. Entering the mall, he listened carefully. He didn't hear any more gunfire nearby. Meanwhile, the 2 men who started the chaos grew worried. The silence was too sudden, and they thought they heard more gunfire coming from different directions. What they heard didn't sound like regular rifle shots. They knew something was off. They decided to throw some grenades at the few people below who were confused and just standing around. Then, they planned to leave quickly. Suddenly, one of the attackers was shot, and his partner looked around in shock. A big man rushed in and started swinging at him. Then the lights went out. At that moment, Jeff carefully climbed up the stairs and saw Harry standing over the attacker, who was knocked out but still breathing. Harry opened a bag and they noticed there was an explosive device inside. "We can't leave these here," Harry said. Mo walked out from a store and asked, "Do you think there are more of them?" "Should we stay and take them out?" someone asked. "No, the police will be here soon." "We should leave," Harry said. "We need to take the explosives, though. What about this guy? Do you want me to just shoot him?" "How about we take him with us? Can you keep him under control?" "Sure," Harry replied, thinking about Ali and the problems he was facing. "Is this a coincidence? I want to ask this guy some questions before we end this," Harry said. "Okay, boss. I can handle him," Mo replied. "You carry the explosives, but don't drop them. Jeff and I will manage this guy and keep an eye out for other threats." While leaving the mall's parking lot, they tossed the explosives into a sturdy dumpster and used a disposable phone to call 911, giving the exact location of the explosives. That was all they could do. They didn't know how unstable the explosives were or if there was a timer or remote trigger. The final count was 11 innocent people dead, including 3 in the security room, 22 more injured, and 5 attackers shot dead on the scene, with 1 possibly still missing, as some witnesses reported. It seemed the attackers who shot him weren't allies or friends. The Chicago police set that information aside for now, but the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and one investigator named Darwin Moore wanted to learn more about these individuals. There were 2 surprising results from this failed attack. First, Mo and Harry were able to gather useful information from the captured attackers, including the name Darwin Moore again. Second, Senator Rayburn used this incident to push for another official Senate investigation into Homeland Security's failure to predict and stop this attack, along with the ones in San Bernardino and Orlando. He was ready to question DHS Secretary Jeb Jamieson thoroughly. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.